I will call the City of Beaumont regular council meeting to order of Tuesday, August the 25th. And as we get going, I'd like to acknowledge that we are pleased to be here today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6. We acknowledge all those who share a deep connection with this land. The City of Beaumont respects the histories, languages, and cultures of all of Canada's First Peoples, whether they be of First Nation, Métis, or Inuit descent, and appreciates that their presence continues to enrich Canada's vibrant communities. We are all treaty people. And as we start tonight's meeting, I do have two proclamations this evening. The first being Prostate Cancer Awareness Month of September 2020, whereas prostate cancer is the most common cancer among Canadian men, and whereas 1 in 9 Canadian men will be diagnosed with the disease, and whereas an estimated average of 11 Canadian men die from prostate cancer every day, and whereas the survival rate for prostate cancer is nearly 100% when detected early, but 3 of 4 men will die when found late. And whereas since Prostate Cancer Canada was formed in 1994, the death rate has been cut in half. And whereas awareness and conversations about prostate cancer can lead to screening and early detection that saves lives, and whereas the City of Beaumont supports Prostate Cancer Canada and everyone committed to raising awareness about prostate cancer, therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor John Stewart, do hereby proclaim September 2020 as Prostate Cancer Awareness Month in the City of Beaumont, Alberta, dated this 20th day of August 2020. And the next proclamation we have tonight is World Suicide Prevention Day, which is September 10th, 2020. Whereas globally, more than 800,000 people die by suicide each year, 1 person every 40 seconds. And whereas suicide is the second leading cause of death among youth and young adults aged 15 to 34. And whereas 1/3 of deaths by suicide are among people 45 to 59 years of age. And whereas the social stigma and lack of support resources often silence those suffering from mental illness, as well as family members who are seeking to recover from the loss of a loved one. And whereas Beaumont residents are encouraged and invited to be part of the growing conversation around suicide prevention in order to better support those who need it, therefore be it resolved that I, Mayor John Stewart, do hereby proclaim September 10th, 2020 as World Suicide Prevention Day in the City of Beaumont, Alberta, dated this 21st day of August 2020. All right, welcome back, everybody. It's the first regular council meeting after the summer break. We're a fairly good agenda in front of us. So first things first, I guess. Are there any changes to the agenda that's presented this evening?
Thank you, Your Worship. Administration has 2 amendments to the agenda this evening for consideration. Remove item 7B, resident presentation, and move item 8D, Rcmp quarterly update, to item 8A. Thank you.
Sorry, that's move item 8D to 7B or 8A?
8D up to 8A.
Okay, thank you. Is there a member of council prepared to move the agenda as amended? Councillor Hendricks?
So moved, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. Discussion on the motion? Councillor Montcalf-Swain?
Yeah, sorry. Can you maybe, Mayor, you heard that a bit better. It just sounded very distant from Shine. Could you just repeat what the changes were to the agenda, please?
Item 7B, the registered presentation of Mr. Joshua Arnold has been removed from the agenda this evening. And the RCMP quarterly update, which was previously item 8D, we're going to do first at 8A. So we haven't added or really, we just changed the order of some things.
Thank you. That's just quite hard to hear. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries. Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, click on your voting button. That carries unanimously, which brings us to the consent agenda of tonight. I move that council consent to approve the following agenda items without debate. Item 5A, regular council meeting minutes of July the 14th, 2020. Item 5B, special council meeting minutes of July 21, 2020. Item 5C, special council meeting minutes of July 30, 2020. Item 5D, special council meeting minutes of August 10th, 2020. Item 5E, regular committee of the whole meeting minutes of August 18th, 2020. And item 10A, Councillor Van Newkirk's report. Discussion on the motion?
No.
All those in favor, please use your voting button. That carries unanimously. Which brings us to item 4, and there aren't anybody currently registered on for the open forum this evening. Item 6, there are no public hearings, which brings us to item 7A, registered presentation of the 2019 Beaumont Night Market Review and future community events from the Empowering Women Entrepreneurs. Ms. Winter, would you like to introduce this one? Or
you waiting for me?
yeah, please.
Thank you. So let's start with our PowerPoint demonstration. I'm Hunter from the EWE. I'm the treasurer.
Welcome.
Awesome. Hang on a second. Not on. I can't see you now.
Did we lose the presenter? Okay, we'll do a quick rearrangement. When the presenter gets back, we'll re-queue this back up. But we'll move on to item 8A, the Rcmp quarterly update.
Your worship and councillors of Beaumont, in March 2020, in response to the COVID pandemic, the Rcmp across Alberta began reducing our non-essential services. The intent was to ensure the safety of our workforce and maintain public safety in our communities. Gradually, as we changed our protocols, procedures, and were able to procure safety equipment, we were given authorization with our relaunch in July of 2020. After a short summer recess, I'm here to present the Rcmp quarterly police report to yourself and to the citizens of Beaumont. I believe you have my police report. I'm going to skip to page 3, which is our detachment crime statistics at a glance. 2020 has been quite the year, and we've noticed that as well in our response to our calls for service. As an anecdote, in March of 2020, initially what we saw was a dramatic decrease in calls for service at the Rcmp office in Beaumont. That lasted about 3 to 4 weeks, and then we saw a slight and gradual return to normalcy. What we first saw were many noise complaints and disturbance complaints. And as I sit here today, I can assure you that I believe we're back to where we were pre-pandemic. So looking at our crime statistics at a glance, we're comparing our major categories, 5-year comparison, and then we'll compare our current year to date, January to June of 2020 to January of June of 2019. So first of all, the 5-year trend for persons crimes, we saw an increase of 18%, and the increase from last year is 14%. We'll actually see the numbers when we get further into statistics, and it's not that big of an increase when we look at the totality of the numbers. On a positive note, our property crimes, the 5-year trend went down 12%, and since last year in the same time period, up to June, we actually saw a decrease in 11% in our property crimes according to the Rcmp. The remaining of our other criminal code, our 5-year trend was a decrease of 54%. Now, while that number seems quite large, again, when we look at the statistics, I think we'll see the beginning of that 5-year trend heavily weighted to that large percentage decrease, and that will balance itself out as we move forward into next year. But even saying that, our decrease in 2019 was a decrease of 11% in our other criminal codes. So overall, even though Beaumont has been getting larger by population over the last 5 years, our total criminal code file numbers are down 19% in the 5-year trend and down 5% since last year. So we go to page 5. Page 4 is just the population graph for those that follow us from time to time, just showing how our community has grown over the last several years. It's based on the city's municipal census. And in particular, I was paying attention to the 5-year trend in our population growth. about 5,000 people in our city. On page 5, again, we'll look at our statistics, and I was looking for anomalies. And it's a little bit hard to judge because 2020 is so unique in many facets, including in the crimes reporting. So we'll go right to the number 1 line, and I'm sure there'll be questions at the end of my presentation. It'll be category under homicides and offense related to death. We'll see where traditionally that number is near 0. We have a number of 6 in 2020. As you're aware, Your Worship and councillors, we had 2 incidents in May of 2020 involving firearms in Beaumont, which is not the norm for our community. However, when we collect the statistical data on that, there's 1 incident involved multiple people. That increased the number to 6. It was 5 on that 1 incident. So later on, I don't have crime severity index stats this year. I can add a comment on that based on an article I read. But what I am predicting for the 2020, I'm only hoping it's a blip in the radar, so to speak, that number will go up next year. But for this 2019 stats, we are again one of the safer, if not safest communities in Alberta. So I go down through those statistics. I can suggest that some of those numbers increased because during the pandemic, we have had a change in what was reported to our office. Some of those are just domestic type calls, and they're not necessarily physical, but they're verbal. So we saw a lot of calls for service going to people, and some of those scoring codes are how we capture somewhere domestic. If they're not unfounded, they go on the list, but that doesn't mean an offense has been proven, because if it is proven by our policy, we will proceed to charge. So again, we are higher than last year. Our total persons crimes for 2020 up to the end of June is 111, where last year at 97. But if we look at the previous 3 years, in 2018, we're even higher at 145. So somewhat consistent. It went up, gone down, and gone back up. So we'll see how that bounces up throughout the remainder of the year. Going down the persons crime, property crimes, overall, the number, again, I discussed percentages, but the numbers are there. Last year, we had 231 reported property crimes at this time of the year. That number in comparison in June is down to 205. So we saw a decrease. One number that really, 2 numbers actually that caught my attention. Number 1 was the reported number of break-in enters. We saw an increase of 25. Now, not to take away from the severity of a break-in enter, but I just want to add that of those break-in enters, 9 of those break-in enters occurred to new home constructions. So yes, it's a serious offense. It involves damage, sometimes to property, sometimes theft, but these are non-occupied residences, but they are counted in the same category for regular break-in enters. An additional 4 break-in enters were garages. So what our officers find on patrol is at times people are leaving the garage doors open. It's an easy, accessible crime to commit if someone's passing by. So if we take that number down by 13, we were right back in that range of where we were last year in our reported break-in enters. On a positive note, one of the areas where we have focused are theft unders. We were down to 51 at the end of June 2020, where last year and previous years were much higher. Beginning of the calendar year, we're engaging our public in simple mechanisms and tasks that can help reduce our property crimes. These are easily preventable crimes. We're talking about removing valuables from vehicles, not leaving keys in vehicles, and we were promoting what's called the 9 p.m. routine, where at 9 p.m. at night, all our residents, they check their property and ensure that everything's secured. So again, I'll bring that to the attention of anyone who's listening, that please, if you follow this procedure, we can really impact that number and decrease it further. And finally, down at the other criminal code totals, again, looking at 2020, we're down to 62 from 70 in the previous year. As I mentioned earlier, we look at 2016 in the gray category. In 2016, we were at 136. Down to 62. So that's where I believe that number of a decrease of 54% will start to normalize a little bit moving forward, because the remainder of the numbers, 75, 99, 70, and 62 are a lot more consistent than that 136. On page 6, there's some of our other less frequent categories. One that I will highlight to everyone's attention were municipal bylaws. There's been a large increase in our municipal bylaws, and that's what we saw with the onset of our COVID pandemic. We had many calls for service regarding noise complaints, loud parties, and disturbances. So that's where those were captured. We'll see if that normalizes throughout the year as we begin transitioning back to, I guess, the new normal in our lives. Finally, on page 7, there are some other positives I'd like to point out on our common police activities. False alarms are significantly down in the last 2 years. And when we get a false alarm, in accordance with the bylaw, we'll send out a letter to our resident to provide them with steps to help decrease these false alarms. If we can decrease the false alarms, we don't have our officers attending to these calls, and it doesn't tie us up from other more pressing matters. So thank you very much for your committee on that. Another one, we started tracking COVID-related calls. So again, this is only from the period of January to June. Of course, the COVID pandemic didn't start to March of 2020. And in that time frame of really March to June, we had 50 complaints related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Majority of those were in relation to returning travelers from out of country, and we were asked to check on self-isolation. And for your information, Mayor Stewart, even though it's not related to this reporting period, regarding our temporary fees covered by law that was enacted and approved in August, we've had 3 calls for service regarding non-compliance with that bylaw. I'll take the opportunity again to encourage our community to do their best in ensuring everyone's safety and complying with that bylaw by wearing a face mask. As I mentioned previously, our crime severity index, I don't have the numbers in, but the day of this report, or after I submitted it, I believe it was Maclean's magazine that published the results of the crime severity index. And again, I'm proud to announce that Beaumont was determined to be one of the safest communities in Alberta, one of the 2 safest, to my recollection. I don't have the exact numbers. Hopefully by next report, I'll be able to provide them. And to prepare you for the 2020, that number may go up. And I'm hoping it's an anomaly to the unique events that we had in Beaumont. Just a few detachment commentaries here. First of all, again, we're fully staffed in Beaumont, but when I say fully staffed, we're waiting on the arrival of 1 transfer, and we have 2 paternity leaves in place right now, returning in October and November. They're considered fully staffed positions. It's an entitlement, but overall, every position funded by the city of Beaumont is occupied. In response to the COVID pandemic, as I mentioned, we reduced some of our non-essential services. That doesn't mean we quit doing certain aspects of our job. We just changed the way we did business. And a quick example would be if someone was involved in a minor motor vehicle collision and had to report that, rather than having them attend to our Rcmp detachment in Beaumont, we simply were communicating via email. Some of these efficiencies we have continued on with as we relaunch into the year. Additionally, on August 11th, the Rcmp across Alberta have announced the ability for communities to report certain crimes online. So those 3 categories are theft of property under 5,000, loss of property under 5,000, and mischief or damage to property under $5,000. Now, I provided the link in the report, but it's quite easy to find on the internet with a simple search query of Alberta online reporting. There'll be an interactive map where a person can find their address in Beaumont, follow some simple steps, and report their crime at their convenience rather than reporting it in person or over the phone. There's a couple exceptions to that rule, and they are outlined on that web page. Whenever there's a witness to the crime, that has to be done in person, and we cannot accept complaints that involved with theft of firearms, personal identification, or license plates. So just a convenience for our community to report, because it is important that we know what is occurring so we can divert our resources to those areas. In February 2020, we also engaged our community with our public policing survey. Our results were very similar to previous years. And because of the whole pandemic And what was identified in that survey, we just rolled our priorities forward from last year to this year because they were identified again through community consultation. Those being impaired driving, crime reduction, in particular property crimes, and community engagement. So a quick highlight on page 9 of where we sit on those priorities. Last year, in the reporting period, we had charged 42 people in relation to impaired driving. And as I stressed before in other presentations and conversations with our community, that number is too high. We want to see it go down. Now, from April to June of this year, we've only charged 6 people now. I'd like to see that number go down. I can't say with great certainty that is because there's less drinking and driving and drinking while impaired on the road. That may be true. However, because of the COVID pandemic, initially we were reducing our non-essential services and non-essential traffic stops unless it was a grave threat to public safety. So I think as the year goes out, we'll see where that number sits at. Maybe it'll return slightly higher. I'd like to see it go down, but only time will tell, so to speak. I've outlined in my report some of the initiatives we have taken to reducing our property crimes under our crime reduction property crimes initiative. And when I say that there's an importance of reporting all property crime, that goes into our hotspot check. So if we have an area in our community that we identify as being a higher crime area, we will control that area, make it a focus point for our officers. Studies have shown that irregular patrols in these high areas does have an impact on crime. We have also successfully used offender checks, and if there are people in our community that are on conditions and we are aware of it, we will ensure that those conditions are enforced on a regular basis. Lock it or lose it and secure it or lose it campaigns, they haven't been engaged at this point. We look to return to those again. They have not been used because of the pandemic. Specifically the secure it or lose it, I'd like to see that return sooner rather than later. We are seeing some calls for service regarding the theft of license plates, and by using a proprietary screw, we can help reduce those crime opportunity. And hand in hand with the hotspot checks with our crime reduction shifts. So if we know a particular time and location are prone to crimes, particular property crimes, we're going to focus our patrols and our officers on those areas. So those are the initiatives. So far, in the highest reported property crime, which is theft unders, we've seen a reduction. Again, we asked our community for their part in reducing this number, securing valuables, locking cars, leaving keys in vehicles. Between the community and the Rcmp, we're confident we can reduce this number even lower. And finally, just before I take any questions, the piece on community engagement. Pre-COVID, we had initiated a town hall and some other in-person community engagements that were well received. Obviously, we're shut down due to the pandemic, so we'll look for new mechanisms to engage our community. It's a valuable piece of communication that we want to return to. And speaking of community engagement, I'd just like to remind everyone that starting next week, there is a return to school, and our school zones will be back in effect. And for all our children's safety, we request that everyone pay attention to that reduction and look out for a little one. So thank you very much, Your Worship, councillors, and I'll take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. I really do appreciate the report. It's always nice to see our crime stats remaining low. It's a little troubling to see they're sort of trending upwards, but you mentioned the Maclean's article, and it was a really proud moment for Beaumont to still be one of the 2 safest communities in the country, or in Alberta, within the country.
Jesus Christ.
Somebody, okay, apologize. Thought I heard somebody. Yeah, so it's great to see that we're still one of the safest communities in the province of Alberta, and that's a testament to the work that's done by yourself and your team. And congratulations on that, and we look forward to many more days. Open it up to questions from members of council. Councillor Hendricks.
Your Worship, again, thank you for the presentation, and certainly the Rcmp do a fantastic job here in Beaumont. Question on infrastructure, whether or not there's a need for any expansion, any need for any more infrastructure pieces. We have a budget process that we're about to roll into. Anything that you could offer to us that we would have to assist you with?
I'll take the opportunity. Thank you. Great question, Councillor Hendricks, and thank you for the opportunity to address this. I think in terms of building, we are well suited for at least the next 5 years. There may be some security upgrades that we may require. And I'm prepared to address that as I guess, a middle person between Rcmp, Department of Security, and our city administration. So I've identified some areas we'd like to see some upgrades, but overall, I think our building meets our needs for the next 5 years for sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Van Newkirk. You're still on mute, Councillor. There we go.
You hear me now? Perfect. Back up to the top of the list there when you talked about the firearms incidents that we've had in Beaumont. Subsequent to those incidents, the RCMP put out some statements to the community, and I think the consensus in the community is that those statements weren't enough. Subsequent to that, the municipality has sent out a couple of letters through the mayor. The mayor's talked with our local MP, Mike Lake, to elevate this within the RCMP hierarchy. Just wondering if we can get some comment on those incidents, timelines, and what we could expect for information for citizens in the future. Personally, I don't think what we got was enough. Thank you.
The media releases in those 2 incidents were put together by our strategic communications unit. And it's difficult. We want to ensure that accurate information is provided. However, unless charges are laid, we're not dealing with public information. So it is sometimes difficult to relay accurate information based on what we know on a preliminary investigation. We referred to our experts. The intent was to reassure our community that we are safe. These are anomalies to our day-to-day life in Beaumont. We put out the information, but we don't control how that's reported on. So hopefully that will address that. I know the message has been brought back up to our strategic communications. In regard to the 2 incidents, first of all, I'll talk about the first incident that involved several homes being hit by projectiles. Where we sit right now is we're waiting for examination of exhibits. So the RCMP and other police forces across the country rely on 2 forensic laboratories, one being in British Columbia and one being in Ottawa. Now, living in closer proximity to those labs does not prioritize your service. So if I live in British Columbia or I'm placing service in British Columbia, that doesn't mean we get faster service because then Beaumont will. So again, concerns have been addressed. The latest information I have on that is that our exhibits are being examined currently, which is a lot quicker of a turnaround than I anticipated. We're a little over 3 months from that event, and we should have a very good idea in the near future where we sit with that investigation and how we can proceed. So again, concerns have been heard, and we're moving forward on that issue. The second shooting, firearms incident, we do not believe to this day that there's a problem that came to Beaumont, is our belief. I spoke with investigators today. They were actually following up with that file. It's currently under investigation, and it's a little more complex. Again, I have nothing to indicate that our community is in jeopardy because of that incident. It's a current active investigation, and it's difficult to comment more. And I do hear your concern, Councillor Van Newkirk, about public information. It's a challenging topic, and I reassure that it's been brought up through the chain of command all the way to our commanding officer of K Division. I hope that answers your questions.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. And it also helps a lot to hear from you as well, to be able to refer the community back to, some of the explanation that you've provided tonight is also helpful. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Newkirk. Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Staff Sergeant Egan. Just wanted to add my voice to Councillor Van Nieuwkerk's comments as well. Yeah, it's. I'm also concerned about the creation of the small amount of information we were able to offer the residents regarding those. I think we referred to 2 separate incidents, and that's also the thing that strikes me when looking at these, looking at the report here, is there's a sudden spike there from basically 0, and then we get 6. My question is that 6 charges, or is that arising from, I think I understood you to say only 2 incidents? So what are we actually counting on that number? Because it looks kind of alarming when you see, what's the wording? We see something, homicides and offenses related to death, and then that suddenly spikes up from 0 to 6 somethings. So could you just reiterate for me what we're actually counting there? Is that charges or incident? Well, it's obviously not incidents.
Yes, I can, Councillor Stout. Thank you for asking. I too noticed that number, and immediately I sought clarification on what that number meant. So what we're looking at is that total number refers to 2 incidents. One is not a shooting incident. It was another matter, as the category is offenses related to death. It was an abandonment call for service that we had attended to, resolved through charge. The second incident is the second shooting in Beaumont. But the way that is calculated, because it's considered an attempted homicide, is it counts the number of potential victims being 5. So even though we're looking at 2 incidents, the total number comes to 6. One from one incident where it's captured, and the other second incident refers to 5 potential victims. So yes, I saw the same number that you did, caught my attention immediately. I saw clarification. So we're looking at 2 incidents, but one counts as 5. That's beyond our control. That's the way it's collected, and the other one counts as 1. Does that answer your question, Councillor Stoker?
Yes, that answers my question. Thank you. So just to paraphrase there, there's 2 separate incidents, and in one case there were 5 potential victims. So that counts as 5 on the report. So from a base of 0, the 6 number is really a statistical anomaly in this case, because 5 of those are from one incident, which, if I understand correctly, didn't actually involve any residents of Beaumont at all, just took place in Beaumont.
That is correct. It's counted as 5, and I did clarify, and their analysts double-checked and verified as well that number was accurate.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. It's concerning when you see that sort of thing, but I'm willing to accept that is just a statistical anomaly in this case.
Thank you, Councillor Stout. Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you very much for the presentation and the report. My question is on page 7, and it's related to the common police activities, one being spousal abuse. And I'm pleased to see, in comparison, the number is down. At least I think we're looking January to June in 2019 as now fewer numbers than in January to June of 2020. My question to you, Commander, is if you're expecting that stat to hold. I know that there have been comments made in media, et cetera, in our region, probably across the world, in terms of those numbers perhaps spiking up due to the challenges our residents and others are having, being shut down and not being able to participate in some of their usual activities and recreation. So I just wonder if you have a comment about domestic violence. It does seem to be going in the right direction. Any thoughts on that? Any comments?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Barnhart. That's a difficult one to answer, but I'll try to provide some additional information. And the reason I say it's difficult is we can only base this on what's reported to the police. We know through our policing experience and private partnerships that not all domestic incidents will report to the police. So that is what the number sits at as being reported. It doesn't necessarily indicate a criminal offense either. It's recognized by that survey code that there's disharmony among persons in a relationship. That could just be an argument, but it comes to the attention of our police and we categorize spousal. So the number is what it is. It's difficult to predict where we'll move forward. And as I mentioned, when we kind of returned back to some normal calls for service, the first two types of incidents we responded to were noise disturbances under bylaws and these types of arguments. Not all were spousal, but lots of calls to service at homes where disharmony was reported. Some were spousals, some were not. So looking at half the year of statistics, as there's more things to do, and there's better access to support services as we move into the pandemic. I hope that number at minimum stays where it is, if not decreases, but it's hard to predict because we're only based on what's reported.
Yeah, I appreciate the difficulty with representing what's really happening and looking at the stats. Just to be clear, when you say reported only, if you go out to a call for domestic violence, it wouldn't necessarily show here unless one of the individuals actually charged someone. Is that correct?
No, Councilor Barnard, to the opposite. It's anytime we go to a call for service that meets our definition as an intimate relationship, it gets that scoring category regardless if there's a charge or not.
Okay, I was having some difficulty hearing, so a bit of an echo. But thank you for clarifying that, and thanks for doing all the work you are doing. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Councillor Danluck.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Thank you, Staff Sergeant, for joining us, and thank you for your service. My question does revolve around future staffing for the RCMP here in Beaumont. We are fully staffed now, as you know from your earlier comments. Do you anticipate, as we continue to grow in the next 4 to 5 or 10 years, increasing staff at the detachment here in Beaumont? Do you anticipate needing new officers perhaps in 2021 or 2022 in the immediate short term for additional staffing? Your thoughts, please.
Thank you for the question, Councilor Danluck. Yes, as the community continues to grow, we want to provide the best possible service. I think it would be a fair estimate on a recommendation of growth as the population increases, as well as the population around our area increases as well. As Edmonton moves south and the rural area becomes more populated. So I put recommendations into a police report on where we believe we would like to see those numbers at. Obviously, we understand at the Rcmp that we are one of many services that require funding. So we'll put our recommendations in for increase in officers, and then it'll be for council to decide and debate if that's where the funding should go. So yes, I do see over the next 5 years being a request for increased police and services.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further requests to speak, once again, Staff Sergeant, thank you for coming in tonight and giving us this report. I mean, it's always great to hear good news, and thank you very much for your time this evening. And once again, continue to do the great work, and we're here to support you when required.
Thank you very much.
We have item 7A. Is Hunter back?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. We do have her back. We'll be letting her in right away.
Okay, so we'll go back to item 7A, Beaumont Night Market.
Hi.
Welcome again.
Thank you so much for waiting.
Uh,
Mr. Mayor and councillors, I am Hunter Gates, Treasurer of Empowering Women Entrepreneurs. If we can bring up our presentation one more time, we'll get going. Awesome. Thank you for allowing me to present this report to you via Zoom. We had another successful Beaumont night market in 2019, and we appreciated the city's financial support and participation at the event. Councillors Daniak and Barnhart participated as volunteers, and we appreciate the fact that the mayor brought greetings and all councillors were able to attend. Next slide. The purpose of today's presentation is to provide the council with an update of EWE as well as what's planning is going on to take place for another Beaumont Night Market in 2021. As you know, last year's successful event took place on Saturday, October 5th. It seems like a very long time ago, but it's not been that long. It's been less than a year. We will share some of the highlights of that event, but most importantly, we want to look ahead and provide you with an opportunity to share any ideas that you may have for us going forward. I would like to point out that the entire event was planned and executed by a small but mighty team of female entrepreneurs from Beaumont who operate right here as the not-for-profit Empowering Women Entrepreneurs Association. As was mentioned, we are a not-for-profit society. We have been in existence since 2016, but have already shown that what we are capable of doing in Beaumont with the help of local business, the city, and our many other partners, sponsors, such as the BBRF and the Beaumont Chamber of Commerce. Next slide. As mentioned, we are a not-for-profit society. We have been in existence since 2019, but have already showed how capable we are. On the screen, you can see, next slide. Thanks. On the screen, you'll be able to see how we did. On the screen, you'll be able to see how we did with our revenue and expenses in 2019. I think we're a thing ahead, a slide ahead.
By the way.
There we go. There we are. Yay! The screen will see how we did in 2019. The most significant changes this year were the 50% reduction of the city grant, less sponsorship dollars, increased vendor fees, increased food trucks revenue, and increased bar revenue. Expenses were kept very close to our budget, and there were no unanticipated surprises, which was amazing. The fact that there is a small amount of revenue remaining is a testament to how hard the volunteers had to work to ensure that the decor, wandering entertainment, and business and busing was looked after. Board members, partnerships, and friends of EWE stepped up to provide whatever, donating their time, money, and creativity to our event. For example, Ruminary Live, JJ Screen Printing, and Seeds and Sprouts stepped up to provide free services for entertainment, printing of materials, and busing vendors back and forth from the high school at no cost to the Beaumont Night Market at all. Silent auction items at the market was valued at $1,475, all donated by local supporters and vendors. Next slide. This is a list of our sponsors and our partners from 2019. We were challenged by increasing numbers of requests that were received by local sponsors as the city has grown, and by the challenging economic times. We did okay nevertheless, and managed to use smaller donations from more sponsors. Examples of how we used these sponsorship dollars included decorations, table and chairs to match the French theme, golden pineapples, food for volunteers, alcohol services, promotion on social media, a specialized kids zone, entertainment for all ages, and as well as our buses. Next slide. Now this slide pretty much is self-explanatory. So in the interest of time, I'll just let you read the slide. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. Next slide. On reflection, we felt that we put on a fine event last year. There are always areas of improvement. One of these was that the permitting for the process for the tent was a bit challenging. And at the last minute, we had to provide fire exits and maintain entrances and exit points for counts. Of course, as you know, in May of this year, we postponed this year's event due to the pandemic. It was a difficult decision, But in light of what was still happening and what we still are happening, we feel that we made the only possible decision. Now, we're thinking ahead to what's going on next year as an organization and as a night market. We know the need for women entrepreneurs to get together and share and network has not diminished in the fact that we anticipate a resurgence of interest once the virus is under control. However, we worry about the viability of the night market at the same time, at the same level of sophistication, given tighter budgets, fewer vendors, and less sponsorship. Our plan for this year is to continue to operate as a society in good standing, to upgrade our social media channels to reach more entrepreneurs, followers, and supporters. We successfully applied and we received a small operating grant from the Alberta Small Business Enterprise Fund. The grant is being used in part as an audit and to improve our social media channels. A second goal of ours is to increase our board and general membership. The work of running a business during these times, as well as an organization, has taken a toll, and we need to keep replenishing our resources. And third, we want to plan ahead for next fall, the fall of 2021, to host another successful night market. Next slide. And so I'll stop here. Let's see if you have any questions or advice at this point in these unusually challenging times. Thank you for your continued support. Last slide. If you have any questions, please let me know. We don't have all the answers for COVID, and we intend to keep on top of it as far as the restrictions go. And we want to maintain a very close communication with city staff. Thank you for your attention and your past support to the Entrepreneurial Women's Association.
Thank you very much for coming in and presenting this evening. This is a great event. It draws a big crowd from around the region to our city and really showcases Beaumont in a positive light. And it's really unfortunate that COVID-19 has put the brakes on the 2020 event, but looking forward to 2021 and seeing what we can do to make that event the best event in its history yet. And yeah, looking forward to support. So once again, you got great support from the city, and we'll go from there. But I'll open it up to members of council for questions or comments. Councillor Danlock.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Thank you, Ms. Gates, for your presentation. And as Mayor Stewart mentioned, the event was a fantastic one in 2019. Unfortunately, this year is not going to happen, as we all know. So I am curious if there is something the city could be doing in addition to doing the grant we have done for you, and I'm happy to do it again this coming year in 2021. What else could the city be doing to assist with the evening that perhaps could be discussed this evening, or just some food for thought for us for next year's budgeting process, perhaps?
There's so many things that can happen. The city we can use some of the city resources maybe to help ticketing, for promotion, getting the word out that we're still here and we're going to click for 2021, get excited about that event. Getting the city involved in that is a really exciting, and it would be really good for us. Supporting anything on social media, following, getting people to follow us on social media is very, very helpful, because any numbers get our word out there, and we are still going strong.
Thank you.
Councillor Mungo-Swain.
Thanks, Your Worship, and thanks, Ms. Gates, for the presentation. Great job, always an amazing event, as everyone is aware of. Just curious, as you start to think ahead, the venue, you talked about some of the challenges you had with the larger tent and then emergency exits, etc. If you start to think about potential different venue change, obviously we've got the new rec centre, which could potentially open up some possibilities. Have you guys started to think about that, or is that too far ahead?
Oh, it's definitely not too far ahead. We definitely have been thinking about it. It would be a wonderful thing for us to go into the new Rec Center and it would be a larger venue. It would be less having to deal with permitting. There's a lot of real pluses to that event, and it will be a great facility to host this because it's a very provincial event. There's lots of people coming from all over the province, and so actually highlighting that building and having people know this is a possibility is, I think, would be beneficial to both EWE and the city.
Thank you. And I don't want to step ahead of any approval decisions or permitting or anything like that, but just most of us have taken a tour through it. It's a beautiful space there, and certainly could help avoid some of the challenges of moving people through, because your event is almost too popular for that space here. So yeah, keep up the good work, and please check in and let us know what you might need from us going forward as Councillor Danlick made. So thanks for your work on this.
Thank you.
Yeah. See no more requests to speak. Once again, it's a great event. Look forward to the coming year and getting back to it after COVID. And like I said, like other councils have mentioned, let us know what we can do.
Will do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so that brings us to item 8B, our connectivity transportation master plan. Who will speak?
Good evening, council, members of the public. Tonight we have Stephen Riggs, who is our municipal intern, who will be presenting the transportation master plan for approval tonight here. So I'll turn that over to Mr. Riggs. Thank you.
All right, good evening, council. I'll just be sharing my screen to present the presentation that we have for you folks. And so I'm assuming that you're seeing that on the screen now and it's all clear. We got a thumbs up. Excellent. So good evening, council, and to all those who are viewing through the live stream. My name is Stephen Rates, and I'll be presenting our connectivity transportation master plan on behalf of administration for council's consideration today. And so for this presentation, we'll be providing an overview of the plan, and this includes the process that went into developing the plan, the recent engagement that was undertaken to finalize the plan, and then that final version of the plan, providing a review of how it is structured and what it will do for the community going forward. And so after we go through all those three steps, administration will then be able to answer questions of council after the presentation has concluded. So the development of our connectivity was initiated in 2016 alongside the development of our complete community municipal development plan. Multiple opportunities for input from stakeholders and the public occurred for both plans between 2016 and 2017, taking the form of workshops, open houses, engagement booths at community events, as well as online surveys. During this period of time as well, the plan was brought forward several times to council for review in supporting its development. And then over 2018 to 2019, the plan was refined based on this engagement, feedback from council, best practices, as well as policy direction from other municipal strategic planning documents. And then this final piece in 2020 resulted in the plan being finalized. And so this finalization process include ensuring the plan was up to date with any sort of regional updates or broader sort of updates that we needed to include. This also included ensuring a consistent level of direction, so removing some of the highly prescriptive policies and maps that were better handled at subsequent layers of the planning framework. This also included revising objectives and policies to ensure that objectives focused on being measurable qualities, while policies focused on being actionable items. We also increased the user friendliness of the document so that it can be easily consumed by a of course, administration, the development community, and the public. And we increased this user friendliness by reducing the complexity and the length of the plan. We completed an entire update to the document's design, which is now presented as one of the attachments. And then finally, we also undertook close the loop engagement process with the public and stakeholders in January, and then also in May and June of 2020. So now to cover what has occurred since the Committee of the Whole meeting on May 25th. Administration has completed the close the loop process that we were about to initiate at that Committee of the Whole meeting. And so this close the loop process included both engaging with the public and connecting with the rest of external stakeholders. The final portion of the close the loop engagement period occurred over several weeks between May 25th to June 22nd. The circulation period to external stakeholders and public engagement, those both occurred at the same time. So we reached out to the external stakeholders and we reached out to the public during those same windows of time. The public engagement process included 3 webinars, which were presented in early June for the public to join in with. We also shared a recording of the webinar that is still available and covered some frequently asked questions. And then also this process included an online survey where we were able to pull some public perspectives from people filling out that. And then the external circulation period included several email correspondence with stakeholders, ensuring that we got comments from the most key stakeholders that we were hoping to hear from. So to review the purpose of the close the loop engagement, this was on informing and consulting with the public. And so this means that we reconnected the plan with residents and assessed how well the draft plan reflects community perspectives. And then we also were creating a chance to share any new ideas or perspectives that we may not have heard so far in the process, or maybe new ideas that just hadn't had the time to come to fruition yet based on conditions in the community. It's important to note, though, that previous rounds of engagement in 2016 and 2017 that happened concurrently with the municipal development plan would have been more participatory in nature. Of course, we're at this close the loop stage within the inform and consult end of the spectrum, but previous rounds would have been further along and being more participatory in nature, like I stated. And so we focused on inform and consult at this stage because we were zeroing in on fine tuning this plan and ensuring that the previous rounds of engagement that we completed accurately reflected the final draft that we were focusing on now. And so to review the results of that engagement, we had approximately 100 participants responded via the survey overall, and just over 100, I guess, engaging within the process by asking questions of us or responding via email and connecting with us via different routes. And so the comments that we received are fully reviewed within the What We Heard report. And through facilitating the final public engagement period, the plan's overall contents were affirmed, and then we were also able to make some changes to ensure that we truly were reflecting the community's perspectives here. The results of the online survey here are portrayed with this pie graph, and they confirmed that, the large majority of folks who responded believed that the plan did reflect community perspectives. So this means that the 3 themes that were captured within previous rounds of engagement, being in 2016 and 2017, were concepts that the public thought, yes, these are the public's, this is the community's perspective. And then we also see that within the plan. They saw that the themes of safe streets for all users, providing transportation choices, and regional connections for all modes were present within the plan, and those were perspectives that the community held. However, we were able to capture some additional ideas that maybe fell outside of those 3 themes, or maybe were finer details that we didn't exactly get to flesh out in the previous final draft. And so we were able to include these or update facets of the plan to reflect the public's comments that we received. So in part, some of these edits included new policy direction and implementation plans to continue to engage on transit operations on a year-to-year sort of basis. We also broadened the policy discussion regarding supporting active transportation infrastructure. Originally, we really focused on cycling infrastructure like bike parking and end of trip facilities, such as change rooms or that sort of thing. However, what we heard from the community that there are lots of things to be discussing here. So we broadened that discussion, like I said, and added concepts or infrastructure such as benches, tables, trees, waste receptacles as additional facets that are supportive of active transportation. And then that final piece, one additional piece that we're mentioning here is we provided a fuller description of on-street parking. And discussing this, we kind of shaped this into a discussion about how on-street parking is a public resource that should be managed in a manner that supports the overall transportation system in the community. And so, as noted earlier, we also completed an external circulation during that May 25th to June 22nd period. And so we got feedback from all the key stakeholders, and this was the full list we heard back from. So we were able to integrate some additional ideas that we received via this external circulation. Comments from Alberta Transportation, the City of Edmonton, and Leduc County all resulted in updates to discussions about regional road and transit connections to ensure they reflected the current context and included future regional policy direction. So larger notes for this included, updating the discussion of Highway 625 to ensure we were discussing it as a larger load corridor, or transit infrastructure, transit stops that will be located within the region were added to ensure we were reflecting the regional policy direction here. And then another aspect was Alberta Transportation and the Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board provided comments regarding ensuring that updates to the plan aligned with pertinent pieces of legislation. So we added a little bit of more nuance here to ensure that updates to ensure that the implementation action items will be completed to integrate these pieces of pertinent legislation. And through this process, between May and July, basically, we were also able to update the plan in a few other ways to reflect feedback that we were receiving, as well as reflect best practices. And so the discussion of complete streets was reorganized. All the main components are still there, but just in a more coherent order. So we did this to improve the clarity of the document, and then also we're able to add a discussion regarding equity within the transportation system to reinforce the rationale behind the complete streets approach that really underpins this document. The plan was also updated to thread the concept of transportation affordability within the policy direction and the policy discussion before that. And that really does reflect that equity piece. This concept was then connected to affordable housing initiatives so that these two concepts, affordable transportation and affordable housing, were well integrated. So, affordable housing, developments would have easy connections to affordable transportation options. This is what this plan would be pushing for now based on the changes that we made between May and July. And then finally, we also updated the implementation action item list, just minor revisions there to reflect administrative capacity in the overall policy direction, ensuring that we were ticking off the right boxes at the right time over those different time horizons. So just to cover the overall structure of the plan now, our connectivity, this will be Beaumont's first transportation master plan, and it follows direction provided for within the municipal development plan, the municipal strategic plan, and regional policy direction. It aligns with existing directional plans and has been shaped by public engagement as well as stakeholder feedback. Its structure provides a strategic framework to unify subsequent policy direction and implementation action items. The strategic framework includes a complete streets design approach, which focuses on enabling safe and comfortable access for all users and of all ages and abilities, regardless of the modes that they choose. This is followed by a discussion of the current context as well as trends that we're seeing within the transportation system, threading in themes of regional collaboration and innovation into this plan. And so altogether, the strategic framework sets the foundation for the vision and goals of the plan, and this vision and these goals inform the policy direction within the rest of the plan, which is bundled within 3 different modes of transportation, being vehicle movement, active transportation, and transit. And so from this policy direction, the implementation action item list identifies tasks and timelines for administration to achieve our connectivity's vision. This approach to implementation will impact planning documents and development projects to ensure that the policy direction of our connectivity is embedded within the development and redevelopment of our transportation system. And so monitoring of this plan will be completed every 2 years to ensure that the plan is achieving its vision and meeting the community's needs. And a major update to the plan will occur within 10 years. And so to conclude for today, administration recommends that council adopt our connectivity transportation master plan as presented. This will now conclude administration's presentation, and we are now able to answer any questions from council. Thank you. And I'll stop my share now as well.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation tonight. There has been a lot of work that has gone into this plan, and that is really very evident. So the request for decision, so the council knows where we're at, or we're here to, is that council will adopt our connectivity transportation master plan as presented. So I'll ask for a member of council that's willing to move that recommendation, and then we'll open it up for questions followed by debate. Councillor Danlock.
So moved, Your Worship. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'll open it up for questions from members of council. And if councillor, if you want to go first, or
No, I'm fine right now. Thank you. I have some questions in my mind, but I want to get them formulated at first. Thank you.
Councillor McGowan-Swain.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. And great presentation and just great overall work to get this done. I also really appreciate the recognition at the front of the document for the previous council who kicked this plan off, and all the engagement that occurred there. So I thought that was a very nice touch, as well as the administrative staff who have worked on this for 4 years. A couple of questions from me. First up, you mentioned, so I automatically go straight to section 6 about the implementation of the plan. You talked about monitoring every 2 years and then full kind of look at it after 10. What's the involvement for council at that point? So I understand administration does the monitoring at those 2-year increments. Is the plan to report back to council on that monitoring process?
So through your worship to Councillor Monkoff-Swain, I can take the first stab at answering this question, but I'll pass it off to other members of administration if there's additional detail to provide. But the intention would be to be reviewing this document every 2 years, providing a report or an update of some sort that can come towards council for council's review and for potential discussion and deliberation at that point. But if there's additional detail to provide from other members of administration, I'd open that up.
Yeah, and sorry, I'll cut off, and if anyone was going to jump in there, I guess I'm not looking for us to dive into the document every 2 years and try to make suggestions and changes. I feel when there's a whole bunch of work that is done to develop these large high-level documents. And the concern is that, great work, and then it kind of gets put on the shelf, but administration uses it every day, hopefully in guiding their decisions. But as council, it's not in the front of our mind. So I think would be appropriate just to kind of check back in and see how it's going, and just provide that more of an update versus asking us for any decisions or anything like that. So that was all my comment on that. So I would appreciate that after a couple of years. Second question, if you don't mind, Your Worship.
Go ahead.
Just regarding on-demand servicing, and I'm just curious about, obviously this has changed significantly since when this started in 2016. There's really one mention in the whole document about on-demand services. Sorry, I'm just curious if you guys got any feedback on that, or you thought about that, or you chose to kind of exclude major sections of that to focus on that. Just curious on your thought process around on demand.
So through your worship to Councillor Monkoff-Swain, yes, we do the discussion of on-demand or newer forms of transit does get threaded in within the trends, and then isn't, I guess, discussed at a very detailed level. But the policy direction within the plan, that was, really direction or an understanding that we were able to garner through the public engagement that we undertook for this, is that there is interest in expanding transit service within Beaumont, and local transit connections was a very key piece of that. Public engagement really indicated that, and best practices, of course, too, that local transit connections, integrating that with land use development decisions, would really support connectivity within the community and fulfill the vision of the plan. So within the policies and the implementation action items, we do have direction to continue to support regional transit connections and implement local transit connections when appropriate. And so it's kind of agnostic on the technology that we would, that administration would be utilizing to provide this kind of service. And that's with in mind, the trends within transportation are so quickly evolving, especially within the past 10 years. So the policy direction, I guess, is at a little bit of a higher level to ensure that we don't hem ourselves in with a specific sort of approach, and that we're more so just pushing for a certain kind of service to be delivered. How that service is delivered is subsequent decisions that administration and council would be making, the municipality overall would be making. So hopefully that provides some clarity there, but I can add any more discussion if you had additional questions.
Basically what I took from that is you guys are aware of it. You're going to be thinking through that as you're looking to implement the plan. So I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
I see Ms. Raymond's hand in the background.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to add to a couple of comments that Mr. Wright presented there. One is that with the on-demand servicing, the policies within the Transportation Master Plan are really enabling. So in that sense, they're broad. As Mr. Wright said, transportation has been evolving very quickly, and we know it will continue to evolve, and we do believe that on-demand servicing can support local transit. So even though it's not explicitly mentioned throughout as a specific policy, I think that it's interwoven through a lot of the different policy areas and can be accommodated as we move towards looking at our local transit and as on-demand servicing evolves within Beaumont. So that won't require a specific amendment to the plan. And then on the other aspect, in terms of the implementation and the monitoring, as Mr. Wright mentioned, will be 2-year increments where we will be doing a more fulsome review. Obviously, the plan is a living document, and as you've noticed through all of our different plans we've been putting forward, we've spent a lot of time working through the implementation of these plans and making sure that they don't just go sit on a shelf. So one of those ways that we're going to be doing that is we are proposing to incorporate some of these outcomes and specific KPIs, key performance indicators, out of the Transportation Master Plan and being able to report on those annually through the annual report that goes to the community. Council will also have an opportunity to be able to talk about that through the strategic plan review that is done every year as well. And then that intention when we're bringing back some of those things on that 2-year reporting timeline would just be any more major changes that we need to make to this plan at that point to keep it current with that full scale update at a later date for rewriting the plan.
That's great. Thank you.
Councillor Stout, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Wright, our administration. A couple of comments first, which is, like reading this report, great report, really support a lot of the concepts here, the complete streets concept, the safe streets for 8 to 80, the emphasis on active transportation, like the park and ride concepts that have been introduced, and the regional transit connections. I think all of that is great stuff and want to see it there and support it. I was particularly excited when I got to the policy statements by 4.5, The city shall ensure that active transportation facilities provide strong connectivity between typical origins and destinations by A, filling existing gaps, removing barriers, and ensuring optimal trail width in the sidewalk and multi-use trail systems. You all know that's something of an issue for me. And B, building out a door-to-door cycling and pedestrian grid made up of various facility types. So I'm really excited to see how that policy will actually be implemented and be applied, and how council deals with that. There was one thing that perplexed me, however, and I'm going to raise this for, on the face of it, it's a cosmetic thing, but I think it's important. And that was the inclusion in the document of a couple of photographs of Ella, which I felt shouldn't be there and should perhaps be replaced, and I'll explain why. Because my understanding of Ella was that was I know there is some discussion of autonomous transportation systems within the document, but my understanding of Ella, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, was that this was primarily an economic development initiative, and that the benefits of the city being able to learn about integrating autonomous transport possibilities into our transit system were secondary considerations. This was not really proposed as a transit solution now or even in the future. Mr. Rates had I think I just heard you say agnostic on technology, and I think that's exactly where we should be on all of these things, including transit on demand as well. But and I'm not exaggerating here, and any number of people have said to me, Councillor Stout, please tell me that Ella won't be coming back to Beaumont, which tells me that we didn't do a great job on communicating the fact that this was primarily an economic development initiative. So by now, and of course, my response to that is no, not as far as I know. That's only if that provides a particular, that would only occur if it provided some brilliant solution to a problem that we needed to solve. So, which currently I don't believe it does. So, including photographs of it in there just undermine that, just create the perception that this might be a transit solution that we're reintroducing, and that and to my mind creates the wrong impression, is a misleading impression. I'd suggest that those photographs are removed and replaced with a photograph of Beaumont Transit buses, or of possible transit on demand solutions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stout. I've noted that down. When we get to the debate portion, we'll see what other members of council have to say about changing out a couple of photographs. Do you have a question for admin?
No, that was the extent of it. Thank you. We're going to have that discussion. I look forward to that discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Lots of ground has been covered here tonight for sure. I wanted to ask a question about the external feedback that we got. It was noted in 3 of the pieces of external feedback that there was a note about make sure you comply with regional legislation next time, and make sure you comply with provincial legislation next time. Just wondering if you could explain how those comments came to be and what the context of those comments would be. Thank you.
So through your worship, to Councillor Van Newkirk, absolutely, we can provide a brief overview of that, and other members of administration can feel free to pile on if there's added context that we need to cover. But the 2 groups that provided that feedback were the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board, and that was for that regional sort of policy piece that we were to align with. And that comment was mainly coming from a place where we have a version of the Integrated Regional Transportation Master Plan, that is the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board's plan for transportation in the region. We have a current plan of that. This plan will be updated in the future. Make sure that when our connectivity is updated, you are also, that updated version of our connectivity is also aligning with that new IRTMP. the regional transportation master plan. So that's where that comment came from. So hopefully that's making sense. And then with the comment from Alberta Transportation, the provincial legislation, I don't have the exact title of the act, but it was legislation related to highways that we were to comply with in the future, and an additional legislation that I don't exactly have the words for right now, but we are to comply with that in the future. We started this, this town of Beaumont would have started this in 2016, the transportation master plan process. And so there were different requirements for the town at that point, as opposed to the city. So this version of the transportation master plan does not fulfill those, but as this was started at when the town was the status of Beaumont, that was not the requirement at the point. So when we look at updating this plan at the future, we will meet those requirements, since we will undertake the update of the plan at a point when the city of Beaumont is a city. So that would be the two comments on that piece.
Okay, and then Leduc County also had made that similar comment.
Yes, and so that would have been just in line with pieces of, or the discussion around Highway 625, but that was just that piece using different words. So thanks for allowing us to provide some greater clarity around that. And any other member of administration can feel free to add some additional context here if need be.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Van Nieuwkerk there. One of the comments in here that Mr. Rates touched on was that we began this process when we were a town. There are different requirements for cities underneath the provincial highway legislation that talks about needing to develop terms of reference in association with the Minister of Transportation. We would work through those different things, and it was felt that because Beaumont's plan was started so substantially much earlier prior to our annexation, that it wasn't in our best interest to go back and to do that at that point. But there are some other things that we will have to comply with in the next time we go through with that, in terms of our roadway classification. We have to work with them on that. It's pretty minor things, but it is a longer process that we'll have to go through in conjunction of that. So we will work with Alberta Transportation as we get closer to doing our update to this plan and making sure that it's in alignment with the requirements for being a city. So we will do that, but we are perfectly fine right now in terms of the provincial legislation at this point.
Awesome. No, that's great. And that's my key point, is just to make sure that we're completely on side now as we, look forward to moving this piece on after 4 years of work. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I see no further hands raised for questions. So at this point, we'll close questions of admin off and move into debate. And so Councillor Stout, going back to his first one, has some concerns around the pictures of Ella within the document. I open it up for comment from members of council. Ooh. All right, so I see no members of council willing to kick this one off. I got to be honest, I think Ella is a neat form of transportation, and it looks good in the document, but I could go with it. So Councillor Stout, are you going to propose an amendment that we remove, or a motion that we remove those photos and replace them? That's currently your option here.
Yes, I'd like to make that. I'd like to propose that, please.
Okay, so Councillor Stout moves that we change out the pictures of Ella in the document to different photos. Discussion on the motion. Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. In support of what's being said, I will say that I took a second look when I saw the picture, but I guess I'm not as worried about it as I am wondering what it would cost to change that out at this point. Maybe administration, could you respond to that? Have we gone too far down the road for printing that this is going to be a major item to change?
Mr. Rates.
So through your worship to Councillor Barnhart, there's been no printing or any sort of larger costs associated at this point with how the document is set. So administration would be able to undertake an edit for, I think it would be 2 photos within the document. We would be able to undertake edits pretty simply for that, since there's been no larger costs associated with printing or that sort of thing up until this point.
And if I could, Your Worship, just, there is one other, if you are changing photos and it doesn't cause you great stress and strain and money, figures 6 and 7. Well, actually it's figure 7, the 3D crosswalk. Again, I heard negativity around it, not positivity. And I'm wondering if that's the best picture we would use, or if there's something else there. Again, it's not a hill I would die on, but I think if we're going to be sensitive to what we heard from citizens, then I think those 2 pictures could be changed.
Yeah. Councillor Stout, are you amenable to a friendly amendment?
Can I interject, Mayor, Your Worship? Point of order.
Sure.
Point of order. Currently, we have a motion on the floor that was moved by Councillor Danlock.
You're correct, and we're voting on an amendment to that motion. Or we're currently discussing an amendment to that motion to remove those photos.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to members of council, the motion that's currently on the floor needs to be dealt with before you can move into another motion. If you'd like to amend the motion, you will need to do a friendly amendment through Councillor Danlock.
All right, we're gonna take a quick 5. I'm gonna confer with admin, because from a procedural process, yeah, I thought the motion that the motion that we're currently discussing was amending that motion to remove those photos. Maybe I wasn't clear. So let's take a little 2-minute break and figure out where we are procedurally. So call the meeting back to order. Thank you very much to the members of council and the public for your patience. There are days that Robert's Rules of Order just really bugs me. Anyway, so in order to clean this up and remove this, I'm going to ask Councillor Danlock if you could please rescind your motion to accept the document as presented, and then we will continue on with debate on. I will ask Councillor Stout to remake his motion, and then we'll continue on with debate on Councillor Stout's motion, and then we'll remake the motion on the document itself after any amendments that get to be made. Councillor Danlock?
No problem, Mayor Sue. I rescind my motion on the Transportation Master Plan to adopt it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Stout, can you remake your motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'll make a motion that we remove the photographs of Ella from the Transportation Master Plan draft before adoption.
All right, and then Councillor Barnhart wished to add the 3D crosswalks. Would you take that as a friendly amendment?
If that's a friendly
Yes.
amendment.
Yes, certainly. So now we'll be removing the photographs of the 3D crosswalks and of Ella, and presumably replacing with different photographs.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And so continuing on with discussion, I see Councillor Monkoff-Swain and Councillor Danlock. Councillor Monkoff-Swain?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Personally, I'll be voting no or opposed to this motion, purely not because of any particular issue, but I think our job is to set policy and not look at photographs in a document. This has gone through 4 years, and I rely on administration to make it look pretty and appealing. I think they've done a great job at providing a document that's easily readable. So well, I appreciate that where that's coming from. I don't think a picture, removing a picture changes, the Ella project in Beaumont, nor does it mean that it will or it won't come back just for having a photo in it. So yeah, just out of principle, I'll be voting against the motion just because I don't think it's our job to weigh on what type of photographs are in these type of documents. Thank you.
Councillor Danlock?
Thank you, Your Worship. I also concur, pardon me. The Ella photograph is fine where it is. The narrative around page 26 and 27 are trends and transportation system. It talks about the future being autonomous vehicles. So I think Ella fits in quite nicely with the narrative of the report, which again, it's also, as everyone else mentioned, a fantastic report. Well done. 4 or 5 years in the making, previous council and ourselves. So I'm fine with Ella being there as part of the narrative of the report. It would be odd to me not to have it there, given the narrative of these 2 pages. So I'm fine with it the way it is. I'll be voting no. Sorry, Mr. Stout, but I think it's part of the narrative. It does fit nicely. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Danlock. I got to say, I tend to agree with you. It's hard to have a section on trends and innovation and then take pictures out of the 2 things that we've actually, or 2 of the things that we've actually done in that space, regardless of whether or not they're primarily an economic development play or something else. So I too will be voting to keep them included in the report. I see no further hands from members of council, so call the question. All those in favor of changing those pictures, say aye. Or hang on, I gotta scroll down. That motion is defeated 4-3. Pictures stay. All right, Councillor Danlock, can you remake your motion to accept the report as or adopt the report as presented?
So, Your Worship, I move to adopt the report as presented. Thank you very much.
Sorry, the council adopt our connectivity transportation master plan as presented.
So move, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Debate on that, continuing debate on that motion. Councillor Danlock?
No, sorry, I just had my button didn't come down when I pressed the button. I apologize for my hands down now. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no further requests to speak, call the question. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Mr. Rates. Great job tonight. And that brings us to item 8B, Overland Drainage Review.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Tonight we have Tyler Tinchishan, who is our manager of municipal projects, who will be presenting to you on this topic. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Your Worship, and through to members of council. I'm here today to present some of the findings and background review information as a result of an investigation into drainage patterns, in particular in the area north of Highway 625 and west of Range Road 243. As a result of that, I will go through some of the details that are within the report, but for the most part, I'll leave some of that open for question and answer and provide a bit of a brief overview to facilitate the conversation and where the recommendation of administration is going. So the area in question is part of an drainage basin of the black mud and white mud drainage corridor, which does contain the Irvine Creek, LeBlanc Canal, 2 primary features that are within the city of Beaumont as we speak right now. The LeBlanc Canal handles the majority, nearly 90% plus of the drainage within the city of Beaumont, which then ultimately discharges into the Irvine Creek. Right now, the Irvine Creek does have capacity restraints, and during what we see during spring runoff, the Irvine Creek is nearly surcharged, where the LeBlanc Canal has challenges getting into the Irvine Creek. As a result, there are regional initiatives right now in play to look at how—
Sorry, Tyler, to interrupt. We're having a little bit of a hard time hearing you.
All right, I will try and adjust the microphone.
That's better, thank you.
I think when you talk into the mouthpiece, it works much better, Tyler.
Yeah, I was just adjusting. Does that make any more of a difference with the volume up?
Better.
Okay, perfect. Okay. For the sake of argument, I will go back to the top there and just repeat some of the statements that I already made. All right, so as a result of a inquiry into the drainage patterns in the area particular of Range Road 243 just to the west and north of Highway 625, Administration has provided a background report into the drainage patterns within the area, part of the black mud and white mud drainage basin. As part of that basin, the Irvine Creek and LeBlanc Canal, two major features within the city of Beaumont, handle the majority of our drainage. Right now, the LeBlanc Canal is impacted in this particular area and does receive surface runoff from the area in question on that northwest corner of 625 and Range Road 243. During seasonal conditions such as spring runoff, Irvine Creek is typically at capacity, which does cause constraints downstream. LeBlanc Canal does have trouble outletting into the Irvine Creek as it is surcharged and doesn't have the hydraulic capacity to enter into the Irvine Creek until levels drop. So just keeping that in mind as we look at smaller tributaries and natural drainage corridors within the area. So as part of that Irvine Creek within the Black Mud, White Mud Creek study, there are some regional initiatives in play, and that is detailed in the report that talk about improvements that could be made to the Irvine Creek in a regional collaborative manner that would help alleviate constraints within the area, in particular LeBlanc Canal, and development around. Those aren't short-term solutions. Those are just initiatives that are being looked at regionally and collaboratively of how they could be funded, designed, and paid for as development continues on. Also within the report, you'll see some information in regards to Range Road 243, the major arterial road that is right adjacent to the area in question. The majority of the drainage within that area is contained within developments east of Range Road 243. You will see stormwater ponds such as Rousseau, Montrose, Danstro, everything along the east side that does trap and contain all the drainage within Range Road 243, both the east and west ditches, and treats, stores, and releases ultimately into LeBlanc Canal. So it is not flowing directly west of 243 into those properties. During the spring this year, a site review was conducted to look at that drainage course to see what was happening in the area to ensure culverts were flowing properly. Those were completed. We did have a collapse on Township Road 510 this year with the culverts that were repaired in the springtime, which did cause some backup and concerns this year in particular. However, that would not be the norm. Also, over the last couple of years, Alberta Environment has been involved in reviewing this area to see what is happening with the LeBlanc Canal, Range Road 243, the properties north and south of 625 to see what is occurring. Their conclusions were that no infractions had incurred by any of the property owners, and that the area north of Highway 625 and west of Range Road 243 in particular is a low-lying natural area and would see seasonal conditions such as spring runoff that would cause localized flooding throughout these naturalized drainage courses. Looking at historical resources, photos, and other photographs that we have available to us, the RV park in question to the west of 243 was developed in and around 2017. And when we look at the developments to Range Road 243, those occurred years before. The conditions that would have been along the west side of 243 were matched and maintained. There was some backsloping that occurred in the northwest corner as well on a property there. However, it was of minimal consequence to the drainage patterns in the area, and have existed as they have going back as early as 2002, looking at some resources being a low-lying area. So as a conclusion of that report and looking at administration's finding, the drainage patterns are typical and seasonal in nature. And when we look at the potential to do any further upgrades or improvements, we always need to be cautious and aware that there are downstream impacts that can occur. No different than the LeBlanc Canal, we have constraints in place as far as release rates. If we're to enhance or increase capacity in one area, the water definitely can flow further downstream and impact other properties without, not necessarily intended, but can occur. The Cheyenne Tree Farms, as an example, to the north is part of that natural drainage corridor, and is part of that natural system. So anything that could be done south of that property, as an example, could have unintended consequences, which would not be favorable. So when we look at all the background, the history, the regional initiatives that are in place, administration is right now recommending that no further work be taken at this time. So with that, I'd open it up to see if there's any additional questions or comments to provide clarity on some of the background information or any other next steps or alternatives that we may want to consider.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation tonight. It was a pretty comprehensive report. At this time, I'll open it up to questions from members of council. About the report. Councilor Hendricks.
Your worship, thank you. Given that this was my notice of motion, thank you for the report, and also want to thank everyone for the attendance yesterday on site, just to get some eyes on exactly what is happening in that corner. I want to take us back to process, and I see a lot of process in our documents. My question would be then, with respect to the civil engineering piece for that property. The stormwater management design for the community went through quite a comprehensive review when we had the 1 in 800 year storm event. In fact, we had 2 competing civil engineering groups brought in to tell us how we're going to get ourselves out of that situation within, the older districts and the newer districts. LeBlanc Canal was included as part of that discussion. And so I didn't see us using Premier RV as a storage basin for stormwater management. I'm not sure, because I'm not part of the admin team, as to what the process is for them to get a permit. They obviously got a permit to operate on that site. They got a permit with respect to drainage. There must have been something with respect to civil engineering that allowed them to go ahead and create the property they have. They've got topographical elevations that were produced, positive drainage from the middle of the piece out in terms of the property. I'm assuming that somebody stamped or signed off on that on their behalf. And I'm assuming our community reviewed it and gave it the green light. So now that we're going through this other piece where we've had, some changes to the stormwater management piece as it comes through Beaumont, which has affected their property, that being Premium RV and certainly the tree farm. What is it that we can do, short of going to Alberta Environment and following, sort of the trap line that I see in the documents, to just instill that, their property isn't flooded, the vehicles that are parked in that property aren't damaged as a result of, water course issues, and something that is not, I see some numbers bolted into our documents that I personally can't agree with, given what I've seen on the course on site, that a fairly simple fix should be a remedy, should be brought forward to us, that these people don't have to suffer this and don't have to worry about this every spring, because it's a reoccurring event.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Hendricks. So a couple comments just on that to break it down. The comment about the approval process for the permit for the RV park. And I don't have all the exact dates, like I referenced the timing of the RV park appeared to be around 2017. At that time, Ladue County would have been the approving authority for that particular development. So the only thing Beaumont would have been involved in would have been as a referral to provide some general comments and likely access off of Range Road 243 really being our direct involvement. So we wouldn't have had any review or direct input as to how that development was going to be laid out, any required drainage studies, etc. That would have been handled through Ladue County at that time. So that's the first point of clarity. Also, as a result of that, looking at that area, as noted in the report in Alberta Environment, they make the point that it being a natural low-lying area and that development was actually permitted and built within that area. So it doesn't imply that that area has been built to store stormwater. It has just been built within an area that has traditionally been low-lying natural area within a natural drainage course, and does continue to see, you know, localized water events during this, in particular the spring runoff of drainage running around that property, which to my knowledge at this time, even though it has potentially encroached and there are some wet areas within that property, that no property damage has occurred or continues to occur during the season.
Okay, so the fact is that there is an approving authority, a body, a governing body for that space that signed off on it. Yes, Beaumont annexed that piece and now becomes the placeholder for all of it, you know, all 21 quarters that we took over. But prior to that, and even during the 1 in 800 year event, Beaumont and Leduc County were working together to ensure that those types of stormwater events wouldn't happen again, including the LeBlanc Canal cleanup. You know, lots of work was done on the LeBlanc to increase capacity and increase flow. So you have somebody that applied through it for a development permit, somebody that got a development permit, and somebody that should be able to enjoy their property without the threat of any sort of stormwater management problems as a result, be it if it was Leduc County's people or Beaumont's people. So what can we do to help mitigate that situation? We know what it looked like this spring, and we don't want to have a repeat of that. And so how can we fix it without, as you point out, LeBlanc, Irvine, white mud, black mud, all gets connected to this process. I was part of that initial team when we went through this whole thing, and I'm glad to hear that there's initiatives moving forward, because it's nothing worse than completing a report and having it put on a shelf. So I'm glad that things are moving forward. But in the meantime, I think something has to be done here, you know, to properly look after these people's property, so that we're not being, you know, we're being good stewards of a situation that is not theirs. They didn't create it. They don't want it. They shouldn't have it. We should fix it. So.
Thank you. And your worship, through to Councillor Hendricks, as a follow-up, acknowledging, yeah, the fact, as you pointed out, the regional initiatives, I think that's definitely a big part of the conversation, that there are long-term and potentially even some short-term type permanent solutions that will continue to evolve through regional collaboration and as development continues to occur. But what I think I continue to hear is what can be done in the meantime as an interim solution. And I think we do need to be cautious with that. While there could be some solutions, we should not jump in without doing our due diligence, as suggested earlier in the report and through some of the conversations, to ensure, if, as an example, there was a clean out of some of those natural corridors, which do exist on private property. So there are some ownership issues and engagement that would need to occur. These aren't corridors that are under the City of Beaumont's jurisdiction. And if there was anything over and above anything other than minor debris removal, it would require Alberta Environment's approval, which would then likely trigger some additional studies, reports, which would then look at that smaller basin, what those impacts could be upstream, downstream, and some of those limits. So that's where some of those figures and timelines come from in the big picture scenario. So I would caution that could be, while that could be a solution to look at some basic clean out within some of those corridors to help improve the flow, we should also be very cautious that if we are to entertain any of those solutions, we should look at least the footprint within the Beaumont corridor up to the Irvine Creek, or at least even LeBlanc Canal, as to if we open up something on the south end and can work through the approval process and land ownership engagement, that we aren't creating other concerns or issues for other landowners as well.
No, that's fair, and that's part of the overall task of getting this thing cleaned up. But in the meantime, we've got this parcel of land. We have a ditch that's running parallel and flanking that site. That water should stay in that ditch. Once the water leaves that ditch and starts finding its way to private property and other issues, that's our problem. And so if we can't, do something to increase the capacity of the ditch, can we at least create a berm or something that's on, let's call it their side of the property line of that ditch to ensure that the water stays on our side of the property line in the ditch?
Okay. Hold that thought. There's a couple other councilors that want to weigh in. I think that's a good avenue to explore, but let's hear from Councillor Danlock, followed by Councillor Van Newkirk.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Mr. Timchishin, did I get that pronounced properly? Oh, there you go. Good Ukrainian like myself. Quick question for you. Your earlier comment talked about, if I'm correct, on the Range Road 243, you mentioned the water holding areas on the east side of 243 also drains from the west side of 243 onto Beaumont area. So I'm wondering where the water is coming from that is causing the issue. Of course, we did the site visit yesterday, as you know, and we saw the culvert under Highway 625. But if I remember you mentioned correctly, the water around 243 that is on our western border drains towards Beaumont into our water reservoirs and storm areas we already have in place. So where's all that water coming from? I mean, obviously it's coming from the south side of 625, but it seems to be overwhelming. The area there is not draining property along the ditch going north along 625. So is that correct? Is it there's an issue there with the ditch there not being properly cleaned out? And if annexation makes it our situation becomes, as Hendrik mentioned, it's our problem now. Is that correct?
Right, thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Daniluk. Yeah, to clarify the comments around Range Road 243. So, and there is within the report package, there's a snapshot there in, I believe it's Appendix 2. I'm just double checking here. Nope.
Was it one area drainage? No.
No. No, it's actually right within the report. Sorry, you'll see a photograph, a drawing there, and it shows the mailbox right north of Highway 625.
Correct.
It's on page 2.
Yes, I see that.
That should help. Yeah. So there's an area there and a descriptor as far as on the west side of Range Road 243. That area does drain into that. Well, whether it's the RV storage or the property to the south, there is an area that does naturally drain west off Range Road 243. And as we continue to develop Range Road 243, the additional 2 lanes down the road and development to the west in the land area, those areas will be picked up. Other than that small area, everything basically does end up flowing north and east into various stormwater ponds such as Rousseau or Danstrow as an example. Those areas are picked up, they're stored and released and ultimately treated and then released into the LeBlanc Canal. So when we look at that road construction project and those 2 lanes of hard surfaced asphalt, that area is not draining into those properties to the west. It's being contained, picked up, and then transmitted into the stormwater ponds on the east side of Range Road 243, other than that small area that's highlighted in that drawing.
Yeah, I see that. Thank you for that. Thank you. I may have another question later, Mayor Stewart. Thank you.
Apologize. Thank you very much, Councillor Danlock. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Just following down that same pathway of Councillor Hendricks's last thought, the construction that occurred at at the corner between 243 and 625, when they widened to get the turning lanes and all that stuff in there, there was substantial construction in that corner, and they cleaned out that ditch and did a good job of making it all pretty and making all the contours work. But it seems they may have cleaned it out too well, because they've exacerbated this problem. What we don't know is if a berm such as Councillor Hendricks just suggested, if that berm was in there, it would solve a fair bit of the problem. Maybe not all of it in a huge event, but a fair bit of it. We don't know if that berm used to exist and it was actually cleaned out when the construction happened, right? So one of the things I think about when I look at drainage problems is what would Grandpa do? Well, we'd have a few loads of dirt in there and we'd be solving the problem. If you could comment, Mr. Timchishin, on the ability of the landowner to, berm up and protect themselves, or what kind of liabilities associated with dropping some loads of dirt in there and getting this drainage from stopping the drainage from coming on their property. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Van Newkirk. A couple questions in there. Looking at the private landowner's right to definitely do work and improvements on their property is definitely well within their abilities, depending on what they theoretically propose to do may open up other avenues, such as approvals through Alberta Environment or permits even through the City of Beaumont, depending on what those land improvements are. Generally speaking, when we look at the Water Act and other provincial legislations in regards to drainage, I mean, you are permitted to do some work, clean out of those corridors as suggested, and if you are to do some berming on your property, that isn't going to have any adverse or undue or adverse effects on adjacent property owners, you're permitted to do so. No different than a typical residential property within town, as long as the, let's call them even just landscaping improvements for simplicity, aren't affecting your adjacent neighbor, then you're typically permitted to make those improvements as you see fit.
So the liability would be high or low or not existent? What would your assessment of that be?
I think that would depend on again what the landowner chose to do. If they were to, as an example, raise the grade on certain areas within their property to get it higher than current elevations, mitigating those natural runoffs during the springtime or major events, I think the liability would be quite low, if any. I don't see that as a controversial type of initiative. If you're to start blocking drainage courses that naturally exist and under the Water Act are protected, that could have downstream effects, as an example, if you're backing drainage up or opening something up and upstream, creating issues for other users, that could open up some liabilities, and at that time Alberta Environment would likely investigate if there were complaints or concerns with drainage and flooding.
Yeah, I guess where the conversation gets to with me is very similar to my eaves draining onto my neighbor's property, because here we have a situation where the water that's being there to be handled by the government ditch and sculpted and managed by the government ditch, something changed in there to drastically affect the property. The property was a low-lying area before, there's no doubt of that. An air photo history review would show that. Through the development process, I can only assume that, as they got their approval from Leduc County, they actually built up the southeast corner of that property. And that would have been detailed in the process. So they tried to mitigate that issue. And now water is coming off the neighbor's property, which is, the ditch of the Alberta Transportation's and the government's ditch, and coming into their property. So that's where the struggle is for me. That the last idea Councillor Hendricks had with replacing a berm around what would be the southeast piece of that the X, I'll call it, to direct that water flow west around the perimeter of the property, seems like a nominal easy fix, but it seems to be that I'm not hearing that it's that simple. So I'll let other councillors weigh in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnhart, followed by Councillor Hendricks again.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you for the information. I'm trying to figure out exactly what would be the next course of action. Mr. Timchishin, I probably did not say your name as well as the others have. I apologize for that. I'm used to calling you Tyler, so I'll stick with Tyler. I'm just wondering if you could outline for me what you think possible solutions might be, because what I've heard so far is that the administration is recommending we do nothing. And I'm hearing that that's not going to be a very good answer. since there's a problem, unless you're saying there isn't a problem, but I'm not hearing that from you. So if we agree there's a problem, what would you suggest we do about it?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Barnhart. Two parts to that. I think as far as identifying a problem, it depends how we want to look at it. There are areas that naturally flood drainage that could affect undeveloped properties, potentially such as this. So does that create a problem? You could definitely say yes from that perspective. In the context of, have we created a problem by not doing anything or not addressing a drainage corridor that needs to be cleaned out, or there's something that's changed in the landscape that's within the City of Beaumont's control. In this case, there really isn't. When you compare what happened with Range Road 243, the backsloping of the property, looking at photos going back to when the upgrades of Range Road 243 started to occur, there's minimal substantial change within that area. Even when Highway 625 and Range Road 243 intersection was upgraded, no changes were made to the grades along the ditch line. Culverts were replaced in their current locations capacity. There was no fundamental changes to those areas. So the only change that occurred over the last 10 years was the installation of this RV park as a use within that area, within that low-lying area. That was the fundamental change. So it depends how you want to look at the context of what the problem could be. To look at solutions as are being requested outside of do nothing as was presented based on the background information, I would suggest that maybe prudent next steps would be to well, we don't always want to just continue to further research and investigate, but if we are to look at some improvements to those natural corridors, clean out potential berming in strategic locations, at minimum, we would want to do some survey work, engage Alberta Environment, look at the larger basin within that area to make sure that what we're doing isn't going to have any adverse effects, and determine what that scope of work could be from there.
I think at minimum, that's what it sounds like to me, if I may. I think that we obviously don't have all of the information in terms of what a solution would cost, how much time it would take, whether in fact there are legal implications to that. So I think some further study may be required. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barnhart. Councillor Hendricks.
Your Worship, I think I just heard a motion. And
I was about to ask you.
yeah, and be happy to follow up that discussion with a motion. I think that the property, once it's got a permit, a development permit, it's on us. Be it Leduc County or Beaumont, it's on us. And then after that, if we're impacting, the pleasurable use of that property, hey, that's on us. So we have to fix this. And we have to do it soon. We can't have a seasonal problem each and every year. We can't have that. So we have to fix this. So I would suggest that we make the motion based on what we just heard from admin in terms of what could be the next steps, including some temporary solutions to get us past this next spring's runoff, so that we don't have Premier RV flooded again with trailers and other things. Within inches of having water at their doors. So we can't have that. And I think we need to fix that. So be happy to make the motion that we move forward at this time.
All right, we'll accept the motion that we take the next steps as outlined by Mr. Tyler. Sorry, I'm getting tongue-tied tonight. Does admin have enough information to get the council's intent with the next steps? Or do we need to outline them for the motion? I think he's frozen.
Your Worship, to members of council, know if we could get some clarity on what the motion is, so that we know exactly what council is looking for, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, we need to get Mr. Timoshishyn back because he's the one that gave us the next steps.
That's correct. And it's on tape now, so we could play the tape back.
Yeah. Did we lose him?
Through your worship, yes, I believe that Mr. Tim Shishin has been experiencing some technical difficulties today. He's been having some issues with his Zoom, so I'm sure that he'll be back with us very much momentarily, but I do believe he was speaking to some burns and some strategic locations that could take place, as well as some further study by a hydrologist.
Yeah, some investigative steps and then coordinate with Alberta Environment.
Yes.
To what possible options could be. So bearing in mind we're missing Mr. Church, does that give you enough to capture council's intent on this motion? And play the tape back if we have to.
Your worship, for clarity then, the expectation is that administration is coming back with potential next steps and the costs of those next steps, correct?
That's correct. But we want to do this with some expediency because we don't want to be letting this drag on for years.
Yeah, we cannot have a springtime event like we had this year again. So we need to have this dealt with, be it a temporary solution by spring or a permanent solution by spring, but we need something before spring, before the runoff.
Thank you, your worship, and just through to Councillor Hendricks. The city can take the necessary steps to get the permits in for approval, but we will be at the mercy of Alberta Environment and their approval process before any action takes place. So there's a couple of steps that have to happen. So your first step would be thinking about what kind of solutions you want, the price tags that go along with it. The next step after that is the engineers and the hydrologists taking a look at it and we're putting together an application that then goes to Alberta Environment for approval before we can dredge or dig or do anything. So just to be clear on what that process is in terms of expectations.
No, I appreciate that, and also that, you know, just standardized maintenance of these ditches. Perhaps they also have to go before Alberta Environment, but clearly that can't be a huge undertaking. That if we ask to get back to a as-built condition at the time when it was first dug, and currently today we have no end of impediments for the flow. If we can't get a hoe in there and clean that up just on a regular maintenance basis, there must be something that allows us to do that without having to go through an entire approval process to get that done. Because otherwise ditches would never be maintained because it just takes too long, to get through the process. So there must be something that allows you to constantly maintain these things just on a normal basis without changing the contours of it. And the other issue is if we can be on private lands and working with the people that own the property, that we say, okay, on a temporary basis, we can do some berming, and perhaps that discussion takes place, which does not, according to the earlier conversation, require all these environmental requirements and applications and hydrologists and all the rest, just to get us past this spring. So if it takes a year plus, at least we got the solution in a temporary basis to hold this water back until we can tie it down to other things. And in the meantime, can't we do the maintenance on the ditches? So.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so is administration clear? Is council clear?
Thank you, your worship, through you to Councillor Hendricks. I just want to read out the motion that you have on the floor, just to make sure that you're okay with it.
Thank you.
That council direct administration to bring back the next steps and costs associated to address the overland drainage issues.
And can we put a timeline on that?
Thank you, your worship. If you'd like to put a timeline on that.
Well, what's a reason? I'm gonna throw that question back to admin. What's a reasonable timeline, knowing we don't want a spring event to happen, to come back with those options and perhaps be part of this budget process?
Yeah, I think I could chime in on that. Looking at a timeline to explore the options. Sorry, I got kicked off there. My computer had a bit of a meltdown. So I'll pick, hopefully try and pick up and fill in where required. If we were to look at some of those interim solutions, i.e. the berming ditch clean out, I don't believe it would take a significant amount of effort to look at what those costs would be. We have comparable projects that we've had in the past where we've cleaned out some drainage corridors, et cetera. So we can definitely pull that together as far as the costs go. I would suggest we could likely within the next 4 to 6 weeks, so probably bringing us towards the end of September, early October, we could have some cost and some options associated with that, and any potential just for the sake of conversation, if there is work that would require any regulatory type approvals or conversation, what that may look like, and we can bring that as well back to the table.
Okay, so if we put a timeline, the first council meeting in October, which date escapes me at the moment, that would be acceptable.
That would work on our timelines.
So can we add that to the motion to bring it back no later than the first council meeting in October? So you can always come early if you have to, if you can. All right, discussion on the motion. Councillor Van Newkirk, followed by Councillor Moncott-Swain.
Yeah, thank you. As Councillor Hendricks stated, the timeline here is going to be the key piece. The other thing that I would mention, and perhaps, I don't know if administration knows this or not, or has to do some digging, but there are provisions when you are in an overland flooding event that allow you leniency to do certain things. I think it would be important for administration to understand where what can be done. So if we are in a situation where we're experiencing spring flooding, again, that we know we can do this or we can't do that to help the situation. Because we've seen how many pictures on the news of stacking sandbags. We've seen, we've heard anecdotally of cleaning out the LeBlanc Canal with a hoe because it needed to be done and it was the right thing to do at that time. So I think it's important for administration to understand under extreme circumstances what is allowable as well. Thank you.
Good point.
Thank you very much. Councillor Moncott-Swain.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Hendricks, for bringing the notice of motion forward. I'm not sure if this is a friendly motion or not, a friendly amendment, I should say, or not. But what I want to make sure is that we've got all the information in front of us by that first council meeting in October. And so I appreciate the fact that go back and get the studies done and figure out some pricing. But I recognize that a portion of this is on private land. And I'm curious, at what point do we have those conversations with the other landowners that are potentially impacted by this? Again, my goal here is to come back and have all the information in front of council so that we have that background. I'd hate for us to have a conversation, get a good idea of the pricing, but then say, well, we need to go back out and reach and talk to the other landowners and see if they're okay with solution X, Y, or Z. So I'm not sure how that works in the process. I just throw that out there for consideration.
Throw that back to admin.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Moncott-Swain. Yeah, just to clarify on the landowner, basically the majority, other than that small northwest corner piece, which really doesn't contain much of those corridors, and there'd be, depending on how far the clean out occurred, if that was to be one of the option, I believe we'd be working with up to 4 to 5 different landowners getting up to Township Road 505. To engage them, depending on their availability over the coming weeks, could definitely occur to review what the initiative is, access to their land, any of their concerns, etc. Would definitely have to be part of it and can compromise the timelines for sure. But to reach out to those 4 to 5 landowners at minimum as part of this exercise, I believe would be reasonable within the timelines projected to at least make that contact and get any concerns or constraints that may come with that engagement process.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to make sure we've got everything in front of us so we can make a final decision on this and either move forward with it or not, right? So thank you very much for adding that in. I'm not sure if we need to make a friendly amendment or not there, Ms. Winter, but I think administration got the intent of my question here, so I'll leave that to your discretion.
Fair enough. Seeing no further discussion on the motion, call the question. All those in favor? Please use your buttons. All those opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll do one more item before we take a quick break again. Which brings us to item 8D, request for council to re-sign the regional violence threat risk assessment. Mr. Stenhouse.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. Yeah, so I just wanted to present the request for decision from admin on MIN's behalf to continue with your support of the Leduc and Area Violence Threat Risk Assessment Protocol, so also known as VITRA. Just some background on VITRA in the region. So it's established by Kevin Cameron from the North American Center for Threat Assessment and Trauma Response, basically in response to attacks on high schools in Littleton, Colorado, the Columbine attack, and as well as in Tabor. The VITRA protocol brings together the school and the community, all those stakeholders that are able to address violence, a violent young person typically, in a community all together to have a unified response. The original VITRA protocol was signed by the town of Beaumont and the municipalities of Kalmar, Devon, Leduc County, Thorsby, and Warburg on March 4th, 2015. There are regional partners as well that have formalized that relationship. So, you know, in addition to all those municipalities, we have Blackville Regional School Division, Evergreen Catholic Separate Regional School Division, St. Thomas Aquinas Roman Catholic School Division, Human Services, Children's Services, Alberta Health Services, Rcmp, and FCSS, Family Community Support Services, whom I represent. Previously, council has signed that originally, as I mentioned, on behalf by Mayor Camille Berube. Rationale behind this is that it works. There's regional partners come together and utilize their own unique strengths and their own knowledge of that young person or young persons involved in the event to ensure that risk is reduced and that there's support around that young person and anyone who may be affected. The purpose of a threat assessment is to ensure the safety of the children, youth, their parents, and others around them, the community overall. Ensure a full understanding of the context of the threat, so it's not just responding to the immediate risk, but you know, what is going on in this person's life, in this community, that kind of thing, and how can we help improve that as well. To begin to understand the factors that contribute to the threat maker's behavior. Spoke to that already, what's going on in that person's life. View that person as concern in need of intervention as opposed to in need of discipline or punishment. But how do we come around this person and support them and figure out you know, a way to move forward. Being proactive in developing an intervention plan that addresses the emotional and physical safety of the threat maker and promoting the emotional and physical safety of all. Between 2016 and 2019, Beaumont recorded 15 VITRA activations of note. 8 were considered low to medium risk and 7 were considered medium to high cases. 5 cases involved a threat, presence, or reference to a weapon. All of those were school-based as well. We are recommending that council, you know, makes a motion to renew their commitment to VITRA and the protocol and sign the protocol again. And basically this aligns with our strategic plan. Typically item 1 under livability, there's community safety right in there, and this speaks directly to that. I will say, just on a personal level, giving some given my dealings with VITRA, I have been involved in a few cases at the stage 2 level. If you all read through the document, stage 2 is where it's the immediate threat is mitigated. Typically that happens with RCMP, school, and anyone else who might need to be involved, parents, family, guardians of the young person. Stage 2 is when we look at that bigger picture, and typically that's where professionals such as myself come in. We might have other support staff in the schools. In some instances, we have children's services, things like that. And that's, you know, we're going to deal with it and move on, and no one really pays attention to that kid from there on. It's really looking at the whole context and what's going on in this person's family and their friends, and where it was the dad of a child who was involved in a VITRA that I was involved with at the stage 2 level, who took the time to personally call every single person that was on that panel, just to thank them, because after intervention in I would say a medium risk case, that slowly but surely just that kid had kind of had done a bit of a 180 in terms of his behavior and things he was doing and all of that. So it was just really nice that, you know, typically in my field, you don't get up a lot of that positive reinforcement. So it was really nice to hear from that parent and just a testament to show that this works. Thank you. I'll leave it to any questions from council.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Very supportive of this protocol. It's been shown to be very effective both within Beaumont and within the region. And so I would be happy to make the motion that council review and support the Leduc and Area Violence Threat Risk Assessment VITRA protocol, and direct the mayor to sign the protocol on behalf of the city of Beaumont. And I open it up to comments and questions from members of council. Councilor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Mr. Stenhouse. Pleased to see this is back, still in operation, and that it's doing what it was intended to do within our region. My question is, based on all of the information that you have and your experience with the program, do you think there are enough mental health supports in our region to help the families and the children that are in these situations and the interventions that you talk about? I get the impression from your anecdotes that they definitely do benefit from having people work together and collaborate in the different agencies. But I know from the work that I've done in the past that mental health services in Alberta for children in particular and youth seem to be less than enough. Let's put it that way. So I guess I'm looking to you to tell us whether there's anything more that we could do, should do. Are the resources sufficient? I support this 100%. I'm just wondering if it's enough.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Barnhart. Short answer to that is no. I don't think you'll find anyone in this field that would say that we have enough of those services. Unfortunately, we know people are struggling, and kids in particular, we've seen rates of anxiety and depression go up. And as those things go up, we need more people to deal with that.
If you had a magic wand, where would you put those extra resources? Would they be into the I would say in the school system, or do you think we need counseling, family intervention? Where's the need appearing here in Beaumont?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Barnhart, yes to all of the above. School is obviously a hub for the community, for the kids, right? And I would love to see more of those type of people in the school on a full-time basis. I think what we have right now with the structure, with some of those people are provincial government people, some of those people are school board people, but there's not a lot of, it's school dependent whether they, or sometimes school board dependent whether they have those individuals in there all the time. Quick thing, what I would like to see is that certain staff such as FSLWs, our family school liaison workers, our mental health professionals, that kind of thing, stick to one school, and you're staying there and building those relationships up. As it stands now, they cycle around a little bit. And then looking at our mental health therapists, we had the Leducan area regional collaborative service delivery model, which is under the Black Gold Regional Schools, I believe has lost some funding this year as well. So those are people like mental health nurses, speech language pathologists, that kind of thing, OTs, all of that. They move around a lot. So what, if I had a magic wand, and first thing I would like to do is have those people integrated right into the school, give them an office. I've seen people in, storage closets and, or just wandering around with a iPad, a laptop, that kind of thing. And that's their office, right? Give them an office, give them space, integrate them right at the school level. And I think that would be a good first step for sure.
Well, I certainly appreciate all the work you are doing. And I think this year coming up is going to be even more challenging with mental health issues and family support. So keep doing what you're doing, and hopefully this will help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I'm completely supportive of this. I can't think of any good reason not to re-sign it. So just one quick question though. Since the first time we signed, we've hired a schools resource officer with municipal enforcement. Does that have any impact on this?
Yeah, Your Worship, through to Councillor Stout. Under the current model right now as it stands, because of the position that our school resource officer is, and that's a municipal enforcement officer, they typically don't come to the table at the stage one. So where that may differ from, Edmonton doesn't do VITRA, but they do similar. But I'm just trying to think of off the top of my head, I can't think of a region that would have a model where they would be involved at a stage one. But if that SRO was an RCMP member, yes, they could be involved right at that stage one, right from the get-go. Where our SRO can be involved is with the same level that I come in. So that would be the stage two. So that's reducing that, the immediate threat is dealt with. And now we're looking at, okay, what can we do now? So absolutely, if our SRO has a relationship with that youth and has some valuable information to give, then they would be invited to the table.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further hands raised for questions. Thank you very much. Appreciate the comments and the feedback from members of council. I will call the question. All those in favor, please use your buttons. And that decision carries unanimously. And with that, we'll take a quick 5. Thank you very much for all your work this evening so far. Call the regular council meeting of August 25th back to order, which brings us to item 8E, Mayor Stewart's municipal election notice of motion. Ms. Winter,
thank you, Your Worship, through you to members of council. In accordance with the meeting procedures bylaw 974-20, once a notice of motion is made, it will be placed on the next regular council meeting. At the July 14, 2020 council meeting, Mayor Stewart made the following notice of motion that council direct administration to bring back a report for a discussion of council at the September committee of the whole meeting in relation to the 2021 municipal election. In broad terms, the subjects of discussion will surround the number of signatures required for nomination, deposits by candidates for election, and political signage. Specifically, these items are addressed in the Local Authorities Election Act, Part 1, Sections 25, 27, 1.3, 2, 29, 30, and Bylaw 944-19, our zoning blueprint, Beaumont Land Use Bylaw Part 4, signs subsection 4.4.4. Tonight, administration is looking for direction on how council wishes to proceed. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. So I will move my motion and explain some of the purpose behind it. Under those particular sections of the Local Authorities Election Act and the Municipal Government Act, we have the ability to have some discussions surrounding those. And so while I'm not, or surrounding those items, signatures for nomination, deposits, signage. And so with the election coming up in 2021 and nomination period starting on January 1st, now, so this fall is sort of the time we have to do that. And knowing that Ms. Winter is going to be bringing back things like municipal election bylaw, our meeting procedures bylaw to conform with new regulations and whatnot, I wanted council to have the ability to have a discussion to inform some of the contents of those bylaws that are going to come back. So I'm not particularly pushing changes per se, but I am trying to facilitate that conversation if council wishes to have it. And so open it up for questions and discussion on the motion. I mean, if council feels everything is fine and we can do it when those bylaws come back, great. If we want to have a committee of the whole to inform to have a robust discussion surrounding it and inform those bylaws before they come, great. Good either way. Questions and discussion. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Just a question for admin. If we didn't support this bylaw and the updates that Mayor Stewart alluded to that were coming in the fall were just left to come to fruition, would the conversation around number of signatures, deposits, and political signage be covered in those items that are coming back, or is there a piece of that that might be excluded in the review that would happen without the notice of motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to members of council, I will, as the mayor stated, I will be bringing back a number of bylaws, one of them being the bylaw 807-13, which is our elections bylaw. And within that bylaw, it does speak with regards to signatures. The province requires 5, so currently that is what our bylaw is aligned with. So that is something that council can amend on that part of it. With regards to deposits, again, that could be a section that we add within that bylaw as well. With regards to the signage piece, I would not be bringing anything forward that has that, because that does fall within our bylaw of 944-19, which is our land use bylaw. So if council wanted to consider political signage, that would need to be brought back separately.
And I think that that has been a common theme that has bothered residents, is signage, the placement of the numbers of signs, and that discussion. So I would like to ensure that we do have a discussion on signage. Mayor, do we need to make a friendly amendment to your motion to just be to talk about signage then if the other things are covered, or how do you think we would proceed to make sure that we can still open up that conversation on signage?
Depending on the comments from the rest of from other members of council, if they feel that we can do it at the time those bylaws are brought, I'm fine. If we want to have the conversation to inform those bylaws before they get brought, we could do it all at once at the next committee of the whole meeting. If members of council, yeah. So depending on what members of council, other members of council want to do, I would just make a friendly amendment and we would just do signage as part of this motion. If when those bylaws come back for discussion, council feels is adequate.
Yeah, so for me, if the other topics were going to be covered by administration bringing back, then I think that works. But I don't want to miss an opportunity to have a discussion amongst council about signage. So that's where I'm at right now. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm sort of waiting for some feedback from other members of council. Councillor Munkoff-Swain.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. So I'll maybe ask a clarification question of you, if you don't mind, Your Worship. When I saw the notice of motion, I wasn't quite sure what the intent was, because as you pointed out, with the changes to the Local Elections Act, I understood that Ms. Winder was bringing that back. So you put those couple of items in there, I think, for a reason. So I'm just curious your thoughts on it. Right now I'm tending towards just focusing on the election sign piece and part of land use bylaw and chatting about it. But I want to give you an opportunity to kind of speak of why you think those particular items would be important to talk about in advance of the bylaw coming.
Well, a couple of things. One, they speak to. There's a couple of sides. There's a couple of ways you can go with either of those topics. If we stick with the minimum 5 signatures, and now we're getting into detail, but if we're looking at keeping with the 5 signature and not having deposits, that keeps the entry easy and people to do it. If we add some signatures, it may add a number of signatures and a deposit. It may have the flip side effect of attracting quality candidates because you'll have people that have planned it out. And I really don't want to get into that discussion tonight. That was sort of the discussion the 25th. It more really boils down to these are topics that can be considered by councils in advance of an election. The Municipal Government Act and the Local Authorities Election Act give us those authorities to make those bylaws and make those changes and set those standards. And so the question is does council want to have the conversations surrounding what those standards are or not? So.
Thank you for the answer there. Maybe I'll direct a question and follow up if that's okay to Ms. Winter. So maybe could you just explain the process? I think as the mayor points out, there are questions through that bylaw that we should be asking and discussing. And I think when you're bringing that back, can you just share a little bit about your timeline on when you think you may be bringing that back, that election bylaw? And then the second part to that is, if we were to have a discussion on that, let's say it was at a committee of the whole, is it reasonable to turn that around before the end of the year to meet the new legislation of January 1st?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Mulhoff-Swain. My timelines that I have for bringing these bylaws back are by the end of October, beginning of November. The discussion that can happen in that with regards to the signatures and with regards to the deposits, those are 2 pieces that council can do by bylaw. So we have full authority, well, council has full authority to be able to make those, to draft those bylaws, which we can do within this. So it wouldn't be a separate bylaw, it would just be amending this bylaw to include those pieces. There is legislation around what council is able to do and how much they can charge and stuff like that. So there would be a discussion on that, but adding those in wouldn't be a concern for my timelines. The only case I would want to make sure, because nomination does start on January 1st, is that we are getting out the information. Should council require more signatures than what the province is allowing through the legislation, or a deposit, we would want to make sure that we get out that information. So if council desires to make those amendments, I would want to bring them back sooner than later.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Winter. And I guess the other piece as part of that bylaw I'd be interested in is in a discussion down the road is talking about the ballot list and how those names are right now. They're placed alphabetically, and I think that penalizes folks towards the end of the list with last names towards the end of the alphabet. And so potential opportunity for us to randomize those. So basically what I'm hearing from Ms. Winter is that you're bringing it back in November. There's plenty of time for us to debate and discuss everything to do with that elections bylaw, aside from the signs and the election signs. And so I personally, don't think we need a motion to come back and have another meeting in advance of that with regards to that act. I think we've got enough time. I do support having a conversation around opening up that section of the land use bylaw and talking about the election signs. Obviously, we all know the comments that occurred during that time. I got some thoughts on how we could potentially look at that. So I would agree with Councillor Van Newkirk's assessment there.
Okay. Councillor Stout.
Yes, in answer to the question, yes, I'd be interested in having that discussion. I don't have an opinion or a position on any of these things. I'd be interested to hear what the rest of council thinks about. Well, I suppose this is increasing the number of signatures required for nomination and requiring or no. But yes, I'd be interested in having that discussion. I think it's worth an hour of our time to get to the bottom of it and make a decision accordingly.
So I guess the question is, do you feel that those bylaws, discussion on those two pieces coming back with the bylaw in October, November is sufficient, or do you want to have a discussion at the committee of the whole to inform how those bylaws come back?
I'd like to have the discussion at the committee of the whole. Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Councillor Daniluk, followed by Councillor Barnhart.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess on this whole issue here, I'm not too sure if the modus of motion is to sort of start talking about restricting people's ability to be a candidate. I'm not sure we're there at this point in time. So I am in favor of the idea of talking about the signage. I think it's a fair point to talk about changing our bylaw regarding political signage, but I'm comfortable with leaving the signature requirement or deposits for the upcoming bylaws. At that point, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
You're going to have to clarify. You don't want to discuss it at all, or you're comfortable discussing it when the bylaws come back?
When the bylaws come back.
Okay. Councillor Barnhart?
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe that's where I am at as well. I have one question though for the administration, and that would be, given the bylaw process, would residents be given an opportunity then to be represented to speak to the bylaw at second reading, or is that only if we require it to be there to be a public hearing? Just if you could comment on that, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Barnhart, this type of bylaw does not require a public hearing.
And so if we were looking for resident input,
Council could look at having a non-statutory public hearing to get feedback from the public.
I didn't hear all of that. Could you say it one more time?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Barnhart, should Council want public feedback, there's a number of ways you could have a non-statutory public hearing, or we could put out a survey.
I'll just speak to that. I do think that there's a need for this to be more open and for those of us that are incumbents to be making this decision just before an election. So I'd like to make this much more transparent, and if that requires us to say so in the public hearing, then that would be my preference. I think having one process is enough. I don't think we need another discussion at a COTW. It's not a bad thing, but I think that's duplication. And I do want to talk about the signage and the land use bylaw.
Okay. I see Councillor Stout, your hand's back up. No?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Councillor Mungas-Wayne.
Thank you. So just if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, with council's discussion here, maybe just some input from administration on would you anticipate the discussion around the land use bylaw and political signage to come back in that same November timeframe, or when would that discussion likely occur? And additional, ask the same question that Councillor Barnhart mentioned, that is, we're opening up the land use bylaw. So I appreciate the answer with regards to the local elections bylaw, but what about the land use bylaw? What's the engagement process potentially on that, or is that just a 1, 2, 3 bylaw case as well?
Well, right now that land use bylaw isn't scheduled to come back for discussion at all. So if we want to do it, then we need to amend. Then I need to amend the motion that's currently on the floor to reflect a discussion and a timeline to do it between now and December. And I'll let Ms. Winter speak to the rest.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Mungas-Wayne. So with regards to the land use bylaw, that piece of it will take a little bit for planning for administration, because we do have to have a public hearing when we're changing anything within our land use bylaw. I guess my question to council is, there is some pieces of legislation when it comes to signage. So I would, if council can maybe give us a little bit of an idea of what they're wishing to see and discuss within that, so we could bring it back to kind of answer those questions.
which would be the purpose of the committee of the whole meeting on the 20 or in September, is to have that discussion and see what admin needs to bring back and flush that out. Councillor Hendricks.
Yes, Your Worship. With whatever we're going to do, time is of the essence, and the clock has been thrown at us for a January nomination start. So we need to have whatever that is cleaned up before that date. So sooner the better. Sooner we're in a room. Sooner whatever we discuss, any adjustments. If we're going to get public engagement, we're already behind the clock. So we got to get going. So maybe at the COTW to get it going. Straighten this thing out as quickly as possible, and then the public engagement piece can kick in. If you wait much longer, you're going to lose your window to get the public piece done. So,
and yeah, and hearing comments about public input and statutory hearings and things like that, I got to admit I'm still leaning towards having the first discussion on this at the community of the whole, so that we can set some baselines and inform those bylaws, because if we're not going to make any changes, I don't think waiting till end of October, November,
right.
If we decide to make some changes and to go get public input on it, I think that's going to cut admin's timelines. So I really think we need to be looking at advancing this into September to have the first conversation. Right. Councillor Margolis-Swain, followed by Councillor Danlock.
Yeah, so I'm okay if we want to change the motion, or if we need to vote this one down and make a new one to bring the land use bylaw back to have that discussion. But maybe I'll ask a question for administration. So, you had indicated, Ms. Winter, that you'd planned to bring this back towards the end of October, early November, the election bylaw for us anyway. I imagine that's a whole bunch of work to be able to pull that all together and understand the new legislation with everything else that's on your plate. So, I guess the question is around timing. Is that a reasonable time frame to bring that back? Maybe that's an unfair question, but September seems awfully close. Committee of the whole, three weeks. So I'm just curious on, would administration be ready to present all the information necessary at that time in 3 weeks?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Margolis-Swain. Currently, the notice of motion is just bringing back information with regards to that. It's not with preparing new bylaws or anything like that, the way the notice of motion currently sits. If council is council suggesting that I prepare these bylaws to bring draft bylaws to the committee of the whole, or are you wishing just to speak with regards to this information and then I prepare them with your recommendations and bring them for first reading?
That's my intent, is not to bring the bylaws back, but to have the discussion on what we want the bylaws to look like, and we can have the discussion surrounding public engagement piece, and then administration will know what they have to do in order to get to the finish line. So, Councillor Hendricks, or sorry, Councillor Danlock dropped his hand. Councillor Hendricks, followed by Councillor Barnhart.
Yeah. Again, it's not that I'm one way or the other. I'm just talking time. And so if you want to flush this out, maybe there's no changes. Maybe there's a whole bunch of changes. Bring this thing to the next COTW. At least then you can flush it out. If you're going to wait till the end of October or November, I mean, you're out of time. And then there's no public engagement. And then you got January 1st for nomination. And then you've got all these incumbents making decisions on the election. Not good. So I would say you go now, get it done now, clean it up, whatever it is, make a decision and move forward. But don't leave it to the last minute, because we'll be heavily criticized and properly so.
Yeah. Councillor Danlock. Councillor Barnhart dropped her hand.
Thank you, Mayor Stewart. Yes, I'm more thinking about it. I'm okay with having a general discussion on the COTW in September, but I am much more in favor of, the signage bylaw being looked at, the political signage, but we have a conversation about signatures and other things at the COW, get a lay of the land. I'm prepared to hold my comments about that idea at that time, but I can work with the COW in September to have a conversation in lieu of the timelines we're talking about. So Thank you.
Okay, I see no further hands, and based on the discussion, I'm gonna leave my motion as it stands to start moving this along. So call the question. All those in favor? Struggling with this computer tonight. And that carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Appreciate. Nope, it didn't. Apologize. It scrolled down. That carries 6-1. Councillor Monkoff Swain in opposition. Thank you, Councillor Barnard. I didn't notice that one. Which brings us to item 8F, Councillor Danlock traffic assessment. Request for decision notice of motion. Ms. Weiner, introduce it, followed by Councillor Danlock. You'll have the floor after that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to members of council. In accordance to the meeting procedure bylaw 953-19, once notice of motion is made, it will be placed on the next regular council meeting agenda. At the July 14th, 2020 council meeting, Councillor Danlock made the following notice of motion: that council direct administration to conduct a traffic assessment on the intersection of Township Road 510 and Range Road 243 to determine the safety of the intersection and provide council with recommendations from the report by November 30th, 2020. Administration is looking at direction on how council would like to proceed.
Councillor Danlock, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate that. I will move my motion accordingly. I'll speak to motion now if I could, please. So as we all know, this to me is a safety issue for us to consider for our citizens. And as the Spine Road opened a while ago, the traffic on 510 coming into and going out of Beaumont has increased dramatically. The intersection of Range Road 243 and Township Road 510, I've witnessed myself in the recent past, last couple months, 2 very near accidents. Primarily when someone's turning left on 243 going west to leave Beaumont. They seem to be getting a little impatient as cars are coming in. They're not signaling properly. And I've seen 3 very near accidents happen. I'm just concerned that intersection, because of the increased traffic flow since Spine Road is open, is creating perhaps a safety issue. And the only way to determine that would be do a traffic assessment to determine if there is a concern. If there's not a concern, that's fine. But if there's a concern based on the traffic flow, that since Spine Road is open, I'd like to have us review that in a proactive way to determine what measure we could take to protect our citizens from having any injuries at that location. To my knowledge, there's been no accidents at that location thus far, but as we all know, moving objects tend to collide eventually. And I do think an accident is waiting to happen. Some kind of traffic control may prevent such an accident if the assessment warrants that some kind of measure needs to be taken at that intersection. So I'm looking for council support to do a traffic assessment in a timely fashion, in a cost-effective fashion, to ask the question if it is a concern we need to address. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Danlock, for introducing your motion. Open it up for questions and comment from members of council. Councillor Monkoff Swain.
Thanks, Your Worship. I guess the question that I have is, there's obviously that road's been studied a lot. We've also commissioned a study to look at 510 generally in the recent budget. So I appreciate time is of the essence, but maybe a question for administration is, as part of that study that we're going to look at the upgrades for 510, is there a traffic impact assessment as part of that piece? Are we duplicating work here?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Monkoff Swain. Yes, we will be looking at those traffic counts as we look at the future design for Township Road 510. There has been a previous traffic impact assessment actually done on this intersection when the upgrades to Range Road 243 were completed. We could update that. We could include that as part of the scope of work with Township 510. Right now, we are working with the consultant to define what that scope and that work plan will be moving forward. So this would be a timely addition to that. And we would need to do a separate salary.
Yeah, thank you. If you don't mind, Your Worship, I'll just follow on with that. I find myself in a tough spot. No one wants to be on the opposite side of safety. And I fully recognize what you're trying to do here. And I'm concerned that I don't want to duplicate work here, but I'm concerned that if I'm voting against this and something happens, then look back, I'm like, hey, maybe we should have done this, and I'm not sure how I live with that. But generally, I think we commissioned that study on 510. It was previously done on 243. Maybe we need to look at some other measures there if we're concerned about safety. More signage around important intersection ahead type thing. But I just I see this as kind of a duplication effort here of what's already gone on, or what's going to be coming up, and what's previously happened. So, yeah, I'll wait for others to weigh in here, but it's a bit of a quandary for me from not wanting to vote against a safety measure, which makes sense. So, yeah, that's where I stand right now.
If I may, Mayor Stewart, on that point, thank you very much. My understanding from talking administration before I made the notice of motion a while ago was the previous assessment on traffic flow at 243 and 510 was done before the Spine Road opened, is my understanding. And since Spine Road was open, that traffic flow, I think it's fair to say, has increased dramatically. And I understand the concern about duplication of work. I want to avoid that too if we possibly can. But my understanding is, from our intention, is the 510 road redesign is going to be sometime happening into 2021. The actual work itself, if it ever gets done at all. I'm concerned that if it's going to be not till late next spring or early summer, maybe between now and then, the traffic flow to me is only going to be increasing on that intersection from this pressure from Spine Road. And our friends from Edmonton coming through 50th Street and going east or west through Beaumont on 510, that traffic flow is not going down either. So I'm aware of the concern of having duplication of work, and it's a valid concern. But I'm of the impression that the previous assessment on 243 and 510 was done before Spine Road opened, and traffic flow is considered has increased considerably, I believe, since that initial assessment was done.
Are we looking for a comment from admin on when that was done?
Yes, sorry, through your worship to Councillor Danilek, I do just want to add to your comments there, and I do recognize them. Part of the work that they'll do on that pre-design and the design report will be to make sure that the assumptions that form the basis of that design are current and they are up to date. So they aren't going to use outdated traffic data. If that needs to be updated, they'll take a look to make sure that those findings are still accurate and correct. And if they need to be updated, then that would be something that we would need to look at as part of this work. So rest assured that any of that work that goes ahead on Township 510 to do the design will be based on the Spine Road, current traffic volumes, and any of those other changes that have taken place.
I was assuming that. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, Councillor Hendricks, followed by Councillor Van Nieuwkerk, followed by Councillor Munkoff-Spain for round two.
Great. So, just as an avid driver in Beaumont who comes to the stop sign at 510 and 243, I'll concur during the let's call it the peak hours that the axle count that's coming up and down 510 is pretty significant, and you have to make your decision very quickly as to whether or not you're going to access that road off 243. Not to mention, and that's if you're turning left and going west, but not to mention there's also quite a blind spot that's developing over time because of the tree farm. Some of the shrubbery and everything else is really grown, and yes, there's a big X in the road telling you not to stop there to allow traffic to turn off 510 and take you west or south, sorry, on 243. But if you creep into that X, you still can't get past those trees. So yeah, the axle count's gone up significantly. The 50th Street functional study had 243 as a bypass, and that seems to be what's happening. It's being treated as a bypass by a lot of people. And then we also had a decision made by admin to knock the speed down from 80 to 60 in certain portions of it, and Leduc County's gone to 70 in certain portions of it, which is, I'm not sure what it's done in terms of creating sort of a traffic pace that doesn't allow access in between vehicles and timing and all the rest. So I look forward to whatever that is in terms of the study to see if in fact, a three-way stop or something is required at that corner. but clearly something needs to be done for its significant.
Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, just a quick question for admin. You've answered this, I think, in a couple of different ways, but in a very succinct way. Is the work that has been commissioned and approved right now, will that work tell us if a stop sign would be required to make that a three-way? Or not?
Your worship, through to Councillor Van Newkirk, the work that is being done on Township 510 will tell us what upgrades need to be taken to Township 510. And we'll include that intersection at 2 break.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor McGough-Swain.
Yeah, sorry for going round two here. I want to get to Councillor Daniluk, but I need a bit more information. So, you know, saying traffic impacts assessment is one thing, but I'm curious on, you know, what the cost for the municipality is, you know, the time that it takes to execute that. We've already allocated some funding to do this other study. So just curious on what the costs would be associated with that. I don't know the process well enough.
Mm-hmm. Comment from admin.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor McGough-Swain. Order approximate cost for a transportation impact assessment could be anywhere probably from about $15,000 to $30,000 for that piece of land.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't I hear you say we were going to do something similar to do within the 510 work? So if we did it, it would be work that could inform Councillor Daniluk's motion and the 510 work as well, so it wouldn't be wasted. Is that correct? Did I hear that right?
Yeah, there are definitely synergies between these two projects, or this proposed project and the Township 510 one that would help with that. As to the exact what's included in that and the timing, I would need to go back and provide that information to council. But we could get that for you relatively quickly.
Yeah, because I'm sort of swinging with Councillor Daniluk and Councillor Hendricks on something needs to be done, but I don't want to spend extra money and do things twice if we don't have to. So I'd be interested in the answer to that question as to if you could dig it up and bring it back as to the synergies between the two projects and what that would do to the timeline. Councillor Daniluk. Thank
you, Mayor Stewart. So based on Ms. Raymond's last comment, predicating the answer to Councillor McGough-Swain, the question might be, if there's more information to be required, again, duplication of work is not something I'm in favor of either, spending extra money. That's not my intention. But if the assessment was done by November and the 510 study is not done until next June, that's a pretty big time gap. I'm concerned about traffic flows increasing all the time. Now, procedurally speaking, Ms. Winter, if we're going to wait for Ms. Raymond to get back to us on her last comment about getting back some more information, can I not withdraw my motion, but can we delay it till the next council meeting, or does it have to be voted upon this evening? It's a procedural question. If we can wait to get more information to help my fellow councillors get this, I'm prepared to wait if we do, but procedurally, can we do that? Or I have to withdraw my motion and bring it back later. Can we do that? I'm just trying to be as accommodating to my fellow councillors as possible on a significant issue.
I'm pretty sure we would just make a motion to defer, but Ms. Winter.
Thank you, Worship. We can, for process-wise, we can table the motion and bring it back.
Okay.
So I guess the question would be for Ms. Raymond. Can you bring the answer to that question back at the next council meeting?
Yes, through your worship, that should be fine. When we look at the next council meeting being September 8th, that should be doable. We'll have to have our consultant price out some options for us to be able to do that, but that should be doable within that 2-week time frame.
Okay. Councillor McGough-Swain, comment?
Yeah, and I don't want to torpedo the motion. I'm just one vote here, so you may already have the 4 votes, Bill. You may not need to do that. So feel free to check around. But I guess if we were going to go that way, one of the things that I would absolutely be interested in is what are some of the short-term options. I agree with Councillor Hendricks, you know, that there is that blind spot there with those trees and folks are creeping out. onto that X to be able to make that turn. So, is there things that we can go out and take a look at without having to commission a study? We know there are a lot of cars on the road. We know the axle count is high, and so can we take a look at some interim measures to try to calm that corner down prior to getting the full study going back? I think that's something that I would support.
Okay, I'm not sure how we get those without the study, but
Well, sort of the
yeah. So
if I can, same way we went from yield signs to stop signs.
Just do it.
They just did it, right?
well, true.
One day and they were done.
Councillor Dunlop, comments?
I guess the thought is, if my expectation is that if we are able to get Ms. Raymond to get back to us on September 8th with the feasibility of having the assessment done as being part of the 510, I'm prepared to table my motion to that point in time. There is argument that, we could simply do a three-way stop. If you all agree the traffic flow is expensive, just do a three-way stop on our own. But I thought assessment would give us the information we need to make sure that a three-way stop is the right way to do it. So my first thought was just make a motion to do a three-way stop. And I thought, well, it's better to have some kind of some validation of the idea of doing that. So that brought my motion forward as is presented this evening. So, but I am prepared to table it if council is comfortable with that. Ms. Ring gets back to us on September 8th and see where it takes us. If that makes the conversation easier, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Councillor Monk, I'm swinging your hand still up. Did you wish to speak again?
I'll just wrap this up, I promise. My last piece, the benefit of getting that study done is, I'm certainly not the expert on whether it should be a three-way stop. My general concern there would be, how much does this back up that intersection going east-west on 510? The whole point of that 510 study is to look at, is a roundabout there the better option, or is it a three-way stop? Is it traffic lights? Who knows, right? So that's the benefit of the study. So I'm okay if you to table it. I'm okay to move this forward now. Councillor Dunlop, if you want to get this going. Just a concern for me of duplicating efforts, but I can see the urgency that is needed. Coming up to winter, etc., and that stop is not getting any safer. So yeah, I'm done. Sorry.
Councillor Dunlop.
Thank you. I appreciate all the comments, everybody, and duplication of work is a concern, as mentioned earlier. So I'm prepared to table the motion September 8th. Get back to Ms. Raymond, and we can deal with the issue. My motion on September 8th. So do I make a motion to table my own motion, or?
Well, you can do it, or I'll do it. But I'll make the motion to table the motion pending more information from admin to September the 8th.
Thank you.
If we're done discussion, we'll call the question and we'll pick this back up on the 8th. All in favor of tabling the motion? That carries unanimously. All right, so we'll get some information, and we'll pick this back up on September the 8th.
Thank you, Council.
Sorry, Councillor.
No, thank you very much, Council.
Brings us to item 10A, Councillor inquiries and reports. Start off with Councillor inquiries. Do members of council have questions of admin this evening? I know I have one, but I'll let other members of council go first. Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, thank you. Mine is pretty simple and quick. I was just looking for update on the neighborhood renewal on 43rd Ave. Just it looked like all of the curbing and sidewalks and landscaping was getting touched up, and I believe some of the paving might be underway soon, but I just wanted some assurance that that would be done before the school buses were traveling down that road. Thank you.
Through your worship, Councillor Van Newkirk, the paving will be undertaken by Thursday this week on that particular road.
Awesome, thank you. And then the conclusion will be same week or very soon after, or?
Soon after.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to continue down. Councillor Van Newkirk set off a good question, so I'm going to continue down that vein with mine. My question is in regards to the project of placing the utilities underground in front of Bellevue School. I went and had a look today after I got some calls from some residents about the war zone. I mean, we have deep holes, we have sidewalks that are not complete, and there's tripping hazards, and it's a bit of a mess. And we got a week. Fortunately, Black Gold has moved their school back a week, but potentially within a week and a half, we have 300-400 kids moving down that road. So I was just wondering what the status was on that project, and if we have some type of safety plan in mind.
Thank you, Your Worship. Bellevue School, the work in front of that will be done by September 1st. If there are any safety concerns with that, we will address those with the contractor.
Okay, so that's put back together, concrete in, bricks back in, bus turnout done, the whole 9 yards?
Yes, thankfully we're going to get a little bit of a reprieve here with the delayed date. We were really aiming for their original start date, but September 1st is the goal.
Okay, let us know. Councillor Stout.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've lost my documentation here. I would like to ask for an update, but I can remember it. I'd like to ask for an update on the municipal reserve woodland, removal of trees, regrading going on there on Forest Heights Phase 9. I'd also like that. I'd also like to know if what response has been received from residents and how we've responded to that.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Stout. So as we are aware, we did have some residents that were upset with the trees being removed. Administration has been out on site several times. We have met with the landowners in question who have been raising their concerns to us to talk about them and talk about what the different options are. We have gone back to the developer, and we are going to be having some additional trees that will be planted between Triumph and Forest Heights along the southern boundary. So we'll be putting the maximum amount of trees in there. I'm going to tell you that's still not a lot because not a lot of trees will fit at this point, but it's better than nothing. So there will be some buffer there between the two that will be restored. So we'll be working with that. And my understanding about the landowner response has been positive. They feel like they've been heard, and they do recognize, as we talked about last week, this is an emotional issue, easier to understand on paper, harder to see on the ground, and definitely more troublesome. But it's provided some different opportunities, I think, for us and how we can engage with the public better to let them know when tree stands and whatnot will be interrupted.
Thank you. Okay, yes, I agree. It is an emotional issue. There seem to be, certainly people don't like to see earth moving equipment trashing trees. And there seemed to be some dispute with one resident I spoke to over where the actual survey lines were and what was an area where things were supposed to be removed and what wasn't. So good to hear that at least some replacement trees are being provided. Thank you. I have a second inquiry.
Sure.
Could administration give me any kind of schedule for completion of the roadworks on Lakeland Drive there? I note in passing that everybody from Beaumont Lakes who wishes to get access, wishes to egress at all is forced to use the ring road, which there are already extensive roadworks going on and holes in the road. So one road is so could you give me some information about the schedule for the completion of the Lakeland Drive closure?
Yes, I can do that. So through Mayor Stewart to Councillor Stout, Lakeland Drive, the long-awaited completion of Lakeland Drive will be done by September 15th. As you know, it's been a gravel road for a long time in a particular stretch, so that is being completed as part of the development that's occurring in Beaumont.
So it's September 15th?
September 15th.
Thank you.
Follow?
Well, yeah, the other question, I don't know whether we'll have an answer for this. Will the roadworks around the ring road around Bow Meadow School there be ongoing beyond September 15th?
That was the same question asked by Councillor Van Newkirk, and it'll be all wrapped up here prior to school.
Different school, Bow Meadows, Beauval.
There was both of them asked. So 43rd was asked about because Councillor Van Newkirk asked when the paving would be completed. That's the one where we're closer to Bow Meadow School.
Okay.
Bellevue School, sorry, was September 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Lots of schools.
Lots of roadworks.
We got lots of money going on this being invested in our community for that kind of stuff. Councillor Daniluk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the administration, just a quick question. As you know, we received a letter from Bowman Manager Hockey Association with some specific concerns they had with communication from the city to their organization regarding ice in the Ken Nickel Center. Can we have an update from administration where we're at with the ice conditions at the Ken Nickel, please?
Thank you. And through Your Worship, Councillor Daniluk. Well, originally we were going to have the icing for Ken Nickel, as you know, for August 18th, and then that got pushed to August 24th. At that time, the user groups were all contacted to let them know that there were delays. Delay to ring 1 was because we needed to reconnect a dehumidifier that was held up because of the roofing replacement. And then, unlucky for us, there was also an electrical problem with the dehumidifier for ring 2, which caused delays for that as well. So staff worked and repaired the issue and worked to make ice leave as quickly as they could. And then in the last couple of days, they had another incident where cleaning solution was spilled on ice, which created a scenario where the flooded water wasn't adhering to where the ice should be forming. So yesterday, concerns were raised by one of the user groups that the conditions of the ice were too poor to be used. So over the last 24 hours, they've been working on it all day, and the ice is in much better shape this evening. So they had planned for that ice to be ready for tonight. It has been inspected, and they've been advised that it's good to go now.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further hands raised for inquiries. Is there any member of council wishing to make a statement or a report this evening? Councillor Van Newkirk.
Yeah, sorry, just to follow up on Councillor Daniluk's question there too. This one had my concern with this whole situation that we were in a spot as council where Beaumont Talks knew about the concerns to the ice before council did, and that always puts council in a tough spot. So I just want to recognize that as well. The timing that we started asking questions and now through to receiving a letter from the user group, that's all subsequent to the fact that the user group was catching wind of delays before council had any awareness of it, and those are things we have to try and mitigate. So just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Are there any further statements from members of council tonight?
No.
Okay, in the interest of time, moving on to CAO's update.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just a couple of brief updates for you. So renovations to accommodate the requirements have started, or the COVID requirements have started now at City Hall, the reception area. The work has started there and will soon be occurring in council chambers. But the plan is to have council's first meeting back in council chambers on September 8th with masks. And then as expected, there has been mixed reviews on the mandatory mask bylaw. But that said, enforcement has seen a really high rate of compliance. We heard earlier tonight that there's only been 3 complaints to the Rcmp about mask usage. We now have 2 sites in Beaumont for asymptomatic COVID-19 testing. It's available at the Pharmasafe and Shoppers Drug Mart here in Beaumont. And that's all I have for you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's no items of correspondence this evening. Do members of council have a notice of motion this evening? Okay, seeing none, we have no items for a closed session, which brings us to the end of a 4-hour meeting. So thank you, council, for all your work tonight, and administration as well. It was a good conducted meet. Or I'm just gonna leave it short and sweet because I'm tired. It was a great meeting. Thank you very much for all your hard work, and we'll consider the meeting adjourned. Thank you very much.